Good day, ladies and gents, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to Splendid Isolation number 181. Let me just do my little boomer text off. In due course. Good. Very short stream this evening, ladies and gents, because although I did reach out to a couple of people today, unfortunately, scheduling clashes, etc., means that I don't have any confirmed guests. And if it's just me, I can tell you this will not be a long stream because despite what some people think, I don't actually like the sound of my own voice. So there we go. What I was going to talk about today, if some guests join us, was a little bit about Donald Trump, not so much the attempted assassination, but more his recent speech at the Republican National Congress, which I thought on the whole was pretty good. And also a little bit about the state of British politics since the general election. And then we've had some fairly serious immigrant riots in Britain as well. Not for the first time, of course. So, yeah, but as I say, if it's just me doing this, then it's going to be a pretty short stream because I just don't like doing solo streams unless it is something that is purely historical. Then I'll do that. Which is my cue to say, if you're in the chat and you've got any questions, do go ahead and ask, and if I can, I will try and answer them for you. I thought Donald Trump's speech at the RNC was pretty good. It was broadly anti-war, which I think most of us on this side of politics would support. It was anti-globalist industrialization, which again, most of us would support. It was anti-green bullshit, which again, is I think most of us can support. And of course, it was anti-immigration, which is one of the few things that I think unites most of the people on the right, is that we're anti-mass immigration. So on the whole, and was also anti-inflation. He also went on about inflation quite a bit, which of course affects all of us ordinary people, because when your groceries and your energy bills just keep getting higher and higher, wages never keep up with that. They just don't. So on the whole, I thought Trump's speech was very good. I've also heard that Zelensky tried to get hold of the Trump team and they refused to speak to him, which I hope is true. I very much hope it's true, because I'd like to see the fighting in Ukraine come to an end. And it's being kept going by the senile warmonger Biden and by British governments, and Starmer is no better than Sunak in that regard. He's still sending weapons and aid to Ukraine, and it's America and Britain and other Western European countries and Australia, which are keeping that war going, when the only sensible thing to do is for Ukraine to get the best deal they can, which is not going to be as good a deal as they could have got 2 years ago before losing hundreds of thousands of young men. So there we go. If Mitch decides to join us this evening, he knows much more about that stuff than I do, because he follows it more closely than me, because he can speak the language. But yeah. Oswolf in the chat, yeah, absolutely. When he said drill, 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 absolutely. But of course, the green agenda and the whole man-made climate change thing is 95% a con, and in my humble opinion, and is much more an ideologically driven thing than it is anything to do with science and climate. As far as I can work out, the weather is not in fact getting worse. In fact, if anything, there are less wildfires and extreme weather events today than there were 20 years ago. I think there's just not real evidence for this. And even if there is some evidence for it, the fact that it's CO2, I'm not sure about that. And if it does get a tiny little bit warmer, that's generally a good thing from agriculture's point of view. You know, the ancient Romans had vineyards in England because it was warmer then. So yeah, I'm really of the opinion that the climate change thing is much more a type of socialist communist nonsense, which is designed to make people in the West poorer, a lot poorer, actually. People don't realize how much it's going to affect us. And you know, the so-called renewable energy, in terms of these wind farms, which slaughter thousands of birds every year, by the way, and these massive great solar farms, which also are terrible for animals. They're far worse than an actual farm for wildlife. Nothing can live under all these massive solar panels, obviously. You know, it's horrible for birds, it's horrible for small mammals and reptiles and amphibians and everything. But of course, the so-called greenies don't really care about nature. What they're mainly interested in is making Western people much poorer. That's my opinion anyway. And in any case, the so-called renewables can't replace gas or oil or even coal. They just can't. The only thing that possibly could, to some extent, is nuclear. And of course, nuclear is the one thing the Greens won't support at all. So, yeah, there's that. So we will have to see. But yeah, I thought it was a pretty good speech. His major things were mostly stuff that I would support. Of course, I'm not an American. But I thought that the speech he made would probably appeal to most average Americans. And I think in any case, after that assassination attempt and the now famous photograph and what have you, I think most people are going to vote for him anyway. I hope so. I mean, I can't see how anyone's going to vote for that senile warmonger Biden. So who knows? We shall find out, I guess. I did think it was funny. I don't want to talk too much about the assassination attempt this evening, but I did think it was funny that the director of the Secret Service is this American who Biden, this woman who Biden put in charge. She was trying to claim the roof, the sniper, the attempted murderer guy. Well, he was a murderer. He did kill one guy. Was on the roof he was on was too steep to put people on, and it was nowhere near as steep as the two roofs that did have snipers on. So I suppose that's a typical thing for a woman to come out with, really. But yeah, Biden apparently has the China virus at the moment again. But there you go. I think he's so far gone it won't make much difference. Whatever, you know. I will be interested to see if Biden doesn't step down before the election, but it's difficult to see who they're going to replace him with if he does. Because I can't, you know, I mean, they're probably on a loser anyway, unless they use fortify the election even worse than they did the last one. But I think they'd have to do so much to do that now. It would become obvious to most normies, and I don't think they want that. But we'll see. How do I do this? There you go. Good evening, mate. And thank you.
Hello.
I hate doing those political streams.
Yeah.
How are you going?
Yeah, good. You?
Can't hear you at the moment, mate.
No. My thing's moving. Can anyone in chat hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
How are you going this evening?
Yeah, good. You?
Yeah, not bad. I've got a cold, I think, to be honest.
Oh, in Australia?
It's the winter here, mate.
Yeah, I know.
And it was actually the last 2 days where I live, which is in Victoria, like not too far from a place called Frankston. It's the weather here has been terrible for the last couple of days, like really cold, really windy, and raining almost constantly. I mean, when I say really cold, not really cold by middle of winter British standards, but cold for Victorian standards in Australia. I mean, you know, people were so cold that people in the shops were moaning about how cold it was. So,
yeah.
We do actually get snow here, you know. I mean, we get snow roughly every 15 to 20 years. It snows in Melbourne.
I know. I did see once there's a ski resort in Australia, and I was like,
no, we get snow in the mountains every year. Yeah, you can drive 2.5 hours, say, from where I am, and you can go skiing every winter. But that's up in the mountains, you know.
Yeah,
whereas we're quite low down.
But it was very expensive to go, which I was quite surprised at for a ski resort in Australia.
Not a cheap place anymore, mate.
No, Japan was also surprisingly expensive to go skiing though.
That's crazy because North Island, Japan, is like always snowy in the winter. You know, the northernmost island of Japan, it's always they get feet of snow even in some of their towns.
Yeah, I've always wanted to go bikepacking.
I follow yeah, that'd probably be cool. I think that would be cool. I follow a couple of channels that are basically Western British people in Japan, British or Australian people, and the cycling is quite big there apparently. So, yeah, it wouldn't be bad. What was your opinion of the Donald Trump speech? If you've had a chance to catch it,
I haven't caught it. I haven't heard it. Was this the one he did at the RNC, or has he done one since then?
Yes.
Right.
No, it's just that one. To summarize it, it was mostly anti-immigration, which of course we can all agree with. Although of course he always goes on about illegal immigration, but that's really huge to America. I mean, it's even worse than in Britain. It was anti-inflation, which I think will appeal to most people. It was anti-globalist industrialization because he was talking about that he wants to bring blue-collar jobs back to America, which again I think is going to play well with his voter base and most sensible Americans. It was anti-war. Which I was pleased to see. Obviously he didn't say anything about the great nation of Israel because no American politician can, but he wasn't particularly keen on the Middle Eastern stuff, and he was extremely anti the Ukrainian story. And in fact, I've heard, I don't know if this is true, but people were putting it up on X and on YouTube, that Zelensky, the Ukrainian dude, was trying to get hold of the Trump team and they wouldn't talk to him, which I hope is true. Yeah, I hope that's true. And also it was very anti-green as well. Like he said, drill, was the guy on the screen here said it earlier. And again, I think most of us would get behind that because, you know, the green agenda, this is what I was talking about before you joined us. As far as I'm concerned, the green agenda is mostly ideological and political rather than anything really to do with climate change or science. But you may think differently, but that's certainly what I think. And that was really what Trump just went on and on and on about all the way through his speech, all those subjects.
I mean, if the environmentalists, the Greens, if the hysterics where they believe that environmentalism is something we have to embrace to avoid an existential threat, as they claim, they would be advocating to like nuke India, but they aren't, so I don't believe them.
And China, India and China, exactly,
wiping out those coal-fired power plants in China.
Yeah, and Indonesia, like just loads of third world places which are still building loads of coal-fired power stations. But I look at Britain, which sits above some of the best coal in the world, in Wales, for example, and I just think to myself, why couldn't we have a couple of really modern, as automated as possible coal mines? Why? It would provide work back in those Welsh valleys again, which would be good for the people there. And as I say, Britain's got some of the best quality coal in the world, and we don't use it at all now.
Yeah. Well, like because Raw Biscuits in chat just said, doesn't Australia send a lot of coal to China? I mean, Australia has an enormous mining industry. There was a big thing that a lot of the lefties used to bang on about. That guy Vaush used to say this years ago. He used to say, all our computer chips are made from coltan, which is mined by children in Africa by slaves. And it's like, that's not true. Almost the entire world's supply of coltan is mined in Australia.
Well, then it's not done by child slaves, I can tell you that.
No. Send those abos down there. That's what I say. But
no, that's not what they do.
No, I don't think they'd be very good at it, to be honest. But no. I mean, to be honest as well, mining today is a very technical industry. You can't just send people down a hole with pickaxes.
And it's also pretty automated.
Yeah.
That's
like you get some. There are some vast mines in places like in Australia, for example, where they're run by only like a handful of guys. That are have qualifications behind them and technical prowess, and it's not
very
like
well
the job
paid as well. They're very well paid as well, Adam. And in Australia, because of a lot of these mines are in the middle of nowhere, a lot of the guys will do like 2 or 3 weeks on and then 2 weeks off, that sort of thing. Which is, if you're a young dude, it's quite a good lifestyle, and it's also a good way to save money if you're trying to, get money together for a house. If you're going to get married, this kind of stuff, it's quite a good way to do that.
Yeah, and of course,
because but when you're working, there's not a lot to spend your money on.
Yeah, I mean, but we saw this on a different scale here with like Port Talbot, where and they tried to claim it was because of Brexit or stuff like that. I mean, I saw a lot of people when that closed. There was a lot of weird narratives around that where people kept saying it was closing, and then they were trying to imply that it was being reopened by some government thing. But no, the plan didn't change from start to finish. They couldn't run a raw steel furnace anymore, and they had to change to arc furnaces. And it just so happens that
why was that? Do you know?
Because of net zero targets. Because I forget what the exact number was, but Port Talbot was obviously, because of the production of raw steel, produced a lot of CO2. Let me have a quick look, see if I can find the exact figures.
I didn't realize that. That's so ridiculous.
Yeah.
That is so, and that's one thing that the Labour Party are almost certainly going to be worse about. Because, it's there's no argument within the Labour Party about that stuff at all. I mean, there's not much in the so-called Conservatives, but there's none in the Labour Party.
Yeah. So Port Talbot was responsible for 3% of the UK's total emissions.
Oh, big, yeah, but the thing is, you see, Mitch, and this is true of Britain and Australia, our emissions are already really, really low. And even if neither Britain nor Australia, or both, didn't produce anything at all in terms of emissions, it would make no difference on the world stage because of China and India and Indonesia and many other places. Like, absolutely no. If reducing Britain and Australia to zero is absolutely meaningless on a world stage, because like China's building, I think something like 50 coal-fired power stations a year. It's just ridiculous. These people are insane who think it makes any difference.
Like, funny enough, I saw something the other day and it made me laugh where they said, someone said they really hate, Victor Caleros said they really hate manufacturing. I often think you can whittle down all of history to a battle between manufacturing and finance, and we're in an era where finance has won and has been winning for a long time. But of course, like, I saw a thing the other day that made me laugh. It was someone trying to justify like the cashless society, and they were saying that it costs more than a penny to produce a 1p coin. And they were trying to say, therefore, there's no point having pennies around or any money at all, any cash money, because it's a waste of money. Of course, that's ridiculous, because each individual transaction of like a £5 note is a fiver. So within like 2 transactions, that £5 has paid for itself, and then with every transaction after that, it's basically cost free. So
it's even worse with coins, which can last over 100 years. You know, you could have coins in circulation for 100 years. When I was a kid,
people still collect stuff now.
We used to get Queen Victoria pennies that were still being given to you as change.
Yeah. And it's like but of course it kind of made me think of, like, with the steel argument, you know, like, I think it costs per ton of steel from Port Talbot on the old reactors. It used to cost 2 tons. It used to produce 2 tons of CO2. But of course, like, steel is around for a long time. I mean, even these arc reactors won't be making raw steel. They'll just be recycling old steel. You could have, if they had enough investment, I suppose, have had arc reactors running alongside regular reactors and produced even more jobs down there. The fact that we now have no capacity to produce raw steel or virgin steel is absurd, but it's also just pathetic and silly. You know, so yeah, the Port Talbot thing is just, it's grotesque, and it really pissed me off at the time to see people trying to, because a lot of people trying to shake that round onto Brexit, and of course a lot of people listening here who know, and some people won't let me forget it, that I voted for Remain, and I still stand by that. But of course, people coming out and trying to blame that on the Brexit referendum when it was literally like a direct policy of the green stuff. Yeah, of net zero policy was just, it was absurd and generally disgusting. And to be honest,
net zero is going to destroy all of our industry that we have remaining, basically. You know, I mean, you can't run any sort of industry on a net zero policy. I mean, as I was saying before you joined us, the so-called renewables, which are not getting cheaper, despite what the pro-greenie idiots try and claim. You know, the windmills that kill thousands of birds every year, the solar panels and all the rest of it, they are not ever going to provide sufficient energy. They just can't.
And
when the wind doesn't blow, you don't make any wind power, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was actually talking to Royal Biscuits in chat about this as well, but maybe it was him, might have been someone else, but in our circles. But obviously I lived in the southeast. I know people that live by Hinkley, the power plant, the nuclear power plant. They get like people always try to tell you that nuclear is unpopular, but people, I mean, I'm kind of against nuclear because I just think they're going to put Shaniquas in charge of any new power plants they build. But you know, Hinkley C down on the coast, like, the people in that town get free electricity for certain hours of the day that they get notified about, like 24 hours in advance.
And the modern Western nuclear reactors are actually pretty safe
Yeah.
and pretty well made, and also can be much smaller than they used to have to be in the old days.
Yeah.
It's the only practical renewable. Nothing else is. But I mean, I take your point about DEI stuff going on with the people who run them. You would have to organize against that, of course. But
Yeah.
the good side of that is that any government that was willing to do that. I mean, let's say we had a Nigel Farage prime minister, for example, who might be willing to do that. I presume he would also go against the DEI stuff at the same time. So.
I mean, one of the things about the nuclear energy, at least, I think I was with some of the Homeland boys last weekend, and we went kayaking. I lost my dry bag over the side of my kayak, lost my car keys, my wallet, and my phone. Not great, but otherwise I enjoyed myself. But I'm sure we were talking to one of them, and nuclear power came up, and they were saying that, like, in a lot of ways, I'm sure this was a conversation I had with them. In a lot of ways, like, nuclear power can be quite nativist, because, of course, you need to be a British national in order to even work in the nuclear energy industry.
Yes, you need clearance. Yeah.
So it kind of locks a lot of them out from taking part, because, of course, even a lot of them who are born here still don't completely or haven't gone through the paperwork in order to qualify to be British nationals. They just have a right to remain.
It would help. Yeah, it would certainly help in that regard.
But someone said David Lammy, head of nuclear energy. Oh, good Lord. You can imagine it. They'll bring back Diane Abbott and give her that job.
Don't say things like that. Don't say things like that, Adam, and they might hear us and do it. Really.
Yeah, but it's like but the thing is, to go back to, like, the net zero stuff, they know, they admit that this is going to destroy industry. I'm sure I talked about it on this stream a while back, but there was a thing, and it was called, like, Project Fire something or other, and it came out of one of the universities here in the UK, and they had in it, they laid out a timeline where they implied that, like, by certain years they wanted to close down all of Britain's major airports for anything except international flights, no domestic flights, and then eventually close them down entirely. They wanted to close down international shipping, and they wanted to close down all. They wanted to basically the only manufacturing they wanted to remain would be purely recycled products.
100%, Adam. But I mean, I think these people, we've all seen the 15-minute cities nonsense and what have you. I really do believe that the first thing we're going to get, well, not the first thing, but one of the things that's going to come in is you'll only be allowed 2 flights a year, there and back for your holiday. That will come in quite quickly, in my opinion. If you're if you're one of the elites, of course, you'll still go jetting around the world in your private business jets. But ordinary people like us will be restricted to 1 flight, but 1 place a year. That will be the first thing they bring in, and then eventually you won't be allowed to go anywhere. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
Mitch, good evening, mate. How are you going? You're muted at the moment, Mitch.
Yeah, because half of dogs in my locker
that's all right.
at the moment.
We like dogs, don't worry. Dogs.
Yeah, mine bark bloody anything, so it gets annoying.
That's all right, man. I don't mind hearing dogs bark. Honestly, it's nice. Did you have a first subject you wanted to bring up, or did you want to talk about anything that Adam and I have been talking about already?
I really look. I mean, it's just all about the system we live under, which is essentially. Oh yeah, I was talking to a Serbian friend of mine earlier on Twitter, and which is pretty much quite good. Oh yeah, we've probably got the worst economy in the world. Like, our economic model here in Britain, we've probably got the worst, because we've got a finance-driven system, which won't be a problem by itself if we didn't have high taxes to pay for social welfare state that fails us, and boat people coming over every 5 minutes. Although I don't know if you heard about Yvette Cooper. Apparently, as Home Secretary, she wants to start deporting illegal immigrants working like in car washes and beauty salons. So,
be good if she does. If she does, every small bit of good.
No, I think Sargon echoes the same, but he reckons that Starmer's a letter of the law kind of guy. He doesn't like illegal immigration. He wants it to all be legal. So we're still going to get hundreds of thousands minimum a year. It's just going to be all legal. None of it illegal. He'll just turf out the illegal ones or give them amnesty, depending on the case. But I'm thinking, Rodbo. So, for example, in my local town, there's a Vietnamese nail salon. And I'm thinking, and if Starmer were to deport those a lot, all the middle-aged women in my area would be them police station bollocking them non-stop. So I don't know how that will turn out when we're
deporting. What, because of the hairdressers and stuff? You mean? Do you mean because of the hairdressers and stuff, Mitch?
Yeah, it's like Vietnamese nail bar workers. Who you can tell they're illegal because most of them can't speak bloody English properly, so you can tell they're illegal. But the problem is, of course, your average middle-aged woman ever prefers them on the cheap. You know, it's like that who will serve us our coffee in Pret kind of mentality. So I don't think that will actually happen as much as Yvette Cooper gobs off about it, because a lot of the voter base will just not like it. Because, you know, it's, as I said, it's that who will serve us our coffee in Pret mentality. It's
craziness. Yeah. Craziness. Raw Biscuits is asking. I'm sorry, Mitch. I beg your pardon. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Mate. Carry on.
I'm sorry. I was just answering like the last sentence. So,
Raw Biscuits is asking Adamant, how do they expect to feed us? I think that's what it is. Us all if they close international shipping. Well, especially Raw Biscuits and Almond, when they're trying to close down the farms at the same bloody time. You know?
Yeah, it's a bit of a mystery, that one. The funny thing is, because a lot of people, like a lot of the whole sort of the WEF people that are always like, oh, you know, the WEF is behind everything, blah blah blah. A lot of those types, they sort of go along with this where they're like, oh, they're going to make us modern serfs, and and it's like, that isn't how they've ruled everything so far. They've always gone the opposite way, which is that they've gone by this sort of like rabble rousing rule of plebs. And that's kind of been the heart of a lot of our problems. So it's a bit weird that they sometimes come out and signal in the opposite direction. But the thing I was talking about I looked it up, it's called the FIRES Project, FIRES. And it was a collaboration between Oxford, Cambridge, Imperial, and some minor universities, along with the government. And what they say about food is they say their target for 2020 to 2029 is national consumption of beef and lamb drops by 50%, along with a reduction in frozen ready meals and air freighted food imports. And then between 2030 and 2049, their target is beef and lamb phased out, along with all imports not transported by train, fertilizer use greatly reduced. And then absolute zero, which is 2050, total energy required to cook or transport food reduced by 60%. Beyond 2050, energy available for fertilizer, transporting and cooking increases with zero emissions electricity.
I can already see the wonderful vegan meals that they'll expect ordinary people to eat, can't you?
Well, bearing in mind, right, they say they want to reduce beef and lamb by 50%. Like, we're halfway through that decade that they've set that target for. And already you've got the likes of Bill Gates coming out and being like, I'm not sure if we're going to pull this off, guys. And of course they can't, because you can't have, like most of their hierarchy is propped up on just pure social status and nothing else. They can't prop it up with anything else, because they can't have like landed gentry or anything like that. Because that goes against their ethos. So instead they have to have pure social status, pure social signaling. And of course, this also plays into like the overproduction, the over mass production of elites that some people speak about. You can't have like a Brahmin / client class / whatever ruling class when they're eating grounded up cockroaches and you know, Bob and his gammon family down the road are eating steak. It doesn't really work. You can't infer social status off of that. And yeah, as Royal Biscuits just said, didn't a lot of the fake meat companies go bust a couple of months ago? We haven't heard much from them at all, have we? What is Beyond Meat actually gone now, or?
I don't think it's gone. I mean, maybe Raw Biscuits in the chat knows a bit more and will tell us, but I don't think it's gone. But I think the idea of producing artificial meat hasn't proceeded as these people hoped it would, shall we say.
I've just looked, and their stock price is still plummeting. And as well, literally at the top, after I Googled it, it's come up as sponsored. And they've got all the Beyond Meat plant-based beef burgers in the sponsor section at the top of Google. And they're all reduced from £4.30 to £2.75. Oh, except Sainsbury's.
Well, they're horrible. They're horrible. I've actually tried one of those a long time ago because a girl got me to try it, of course. I would never have bought them. But they're horrible. They're just horrible.
Yeah.
I would never have spent my money on buying something. A girl made me one of these plant-based supposed burgers, and they're just not nice. They taste of nothing, basically. Can I ask you and Mitch, Adam, are they doing the same thing in Britain that they're doing in Australia? Like, it used to be that if you bought, even, you know, you went to a typical big supermarket, and in their meat section, and you bought a rump steak, it'd be quite a thick rump steak, you know, it'd be like an inch or something like that. Yeah. And nowadays, like, I do most of my shopping online these days because I had a heart attack, basically. And I'm not supposed to carry lots of stuff and all this sort of nonsense. And I order a rump steak now, and it's like a quarter of an inch or half an inch, you know. It's like it's still a rump steak, but it's half the depth, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. Well, I think they do that to combat inflation, don't they? To keep, because otherwise the price would be astronomical.
Yeah, but I'm sure that is part of the reason for. I mean, obviously, you know, all the push for not having beef and lamb. One of the ways they're doing that is by making it more expensive, of course.
I mean, a lot of your vegetables as well. Like, if you compared them to like 60 years ago, a lot of your vegetables literally have like 20% less nutrients in them than they used to. Like the vegetables and fruit is literally less dense than it used to be.
I've got to tell you, Royal Biscuits, where I live, right, there literally is not a Bush's. I mean, there may be one somewhere in Frankston, for example, which is my nearest town, which is, I don't know, 40 minutes away. But I don't know if there's one there. If someone told me there was one, I'd go there. But I literally don't know if there is one. I've never seen one in Frankston. But then I don't really go there socially much unless I'm out with a couple of my mates or something, and we're only interested in going to a bar. So, you know.
Yeah, Victor Caleros said in chat, he said, meat is expensive now, eggs and butter too. It is weird to see what stuff has gone up in price and what hasn't. And it changes sometimes based on the area. So, like, meat, eggs, and butter is expensive here. Another thing I noticed was like Coca-Cola and sweets are expensive here as well. And then when I went to like Italy, and I was in a particularly rural area of Italy, but like bread and butter was dirt cheap, like dirt cheap. But like Coca-Cola was very cheap as well, like shockingly cheap. I suppose because it didn't have a sugar tax on it. But a lot of the other stuff was also very expensive.
May I ask, Adam, where did you go in Italy? Just out of interest.
It was in the Northern Dolomites in South Tyrol.
Oh, cool, man. Very nice. Yeah, very nice. I've been to Italy a couple of times. But I was gonna ask you if you went to any of the ancient Roman stuff or anything like that.
I mean, I have done in the past. I've been there like 5 times. Still don't speak a word of Italian.
Yeah, it's a pretty country, and it's just got so much history. It's really cool. I should mention at this point, I did ask Marcus to join us this evening, and he might later on because he had a schedule clash. He'd already agreed to go on somebody else's stream, but if we go on more than 2 hours, he may join us for half an hour or so. So we'll see.
Yeah. So I saw something else as well, talking about food prices. I saw something else as well where I looked and it's something had gone up by like 400% in the last 5 years. And I was like, good grief. I can't remember what it was.
I tell you, one of the things I thought of, because I was just talking about Marcus, and he's a seed oil hater.
Yeah.
Is
he
olive
used to
oil.
be a chef.
Olive oil is so expensive now.
Yeah. Yeah,
a liter of olive oil here in Australia is now like $20, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, that's $20 Australian, which is less than $20 American, but it's not cheap.
Yeah, I mean, I try to use either coconut oil or olive oil, but yeah, it is so expensive. I end up having to resort to being a seed oil enjoyer on occasions.
Yeah, I very occasionally buy seed oil, but I don't like it, to be honest. I must admit, I try only to buy olive oil. Although I mostly end up buying Spanish olive oil, which is the cheapest, which I always think is funny because if you've ever been to Rome, that great big hill in Rome, which is all these pieces of amphora. There's a big hill there, and there's some name for it which I can't remember now. But it's basically a Roman rubbish dump of all these great big jars that they used to ship the olive oil in, and it was all Spanish olive oil, apparently. Yeah. So nothing's changed, really.
Yeah.
That's pretty expensive for our biscuits.
That's actually a similar price to where I am. It's very expensive down here. I know Royal Biscuits is like
expensive.
Not strictly southeast, but not far out. So
I occasionally go to my local fish and chip shop because fish and chips is a big thing in Australia as well as it is in the UK. And I buy whiting, which is a local fish, and a small chips, and that is, I think it's $15 now for whiting and a small chips.
Good God.
Because I never finish even a small chips. But
what is $15 in pounds now?
That would probably
is it more than £3?
Oh yeah, you loads more, mate. But you're probably talking about 11 quid, something like that. I reckon. 10,
I know the
11
Australian
quid.
dollar gone up, but that's a lot.
Yeah, it's 10 or 11 quid. But it's less than, it's quite, we're a fair bit under an American dollar. So I know, and I only know that because I will occasionally send a super chat to somebody, and that's always charged in American dollars for me for whatever reason. And it's generally like about 20% more than it would be in Australian dollars, something like that.
Yeah.
Mitch, did you have anything that you wanted to bring up as a first subject at all?
I can't really think of anything. I mean, I actually want to carry on that Discord debate between the pair of us over America.
Well, if you look, I tell you what, I don't think it's even a debate, and I think you recognise it the same as I do. It's we're kind of talking at each other from a different angle. So we're talking past each other is what I think. And I think it's probably my fault as much as yours. It's that I am not particularly anti-American. I'm anti-American government for sure, but I'm anti-British government as well. But I'm not anti-American. I've got American friends. I've had American friends and American comrades in the past who have been absolutely great people. So that's my only point. It's like I'm no fan of the American government. I'm no fan of the British government being an absolute poodle to the American government all the time. No fan of either of those things. But if you're going to tell me like an average Midwestern American is a bad person, I'm probably going to say no, they're not. But like I said, I don't think that's what you're saying. I don't think that's what you're saying.
Londonistan. This is like, I'm looking at America in terms of their political factions. Okay, you got the shitlib retards who think they're being edgy by saying talking about I don't know teeth or whatever when it comes to us. Then there's the magatards who think they're Billy Big Bollocks because they're talking about Sadiq Khan and Londonistan, and I'm just thinking okay, there are parts of Michigan and Minnesota where Muslims control those areas. And I'm thinking, I'm not going to take advice from a Yank about how to run my own country. I've already run my own into dirt. And then we're going to spend my time making smug remarks every 5 minutes about our situation. No, I can't be arsed with that, personally.
All right. That to me is a fair point. I think the only way Americans can do that, and do quite frequently, is with guns. Although, of course, the current American government under senile Biden, the warmongering bastard, and his people who control him, the Americans can absolutely have a go at us in terms of the fact that we lost our gun rights a long time ago. We used to have them.
Okay. And what does gun rights do for America? It's like Endeavor's more articulate than me on saying this, but those gun rights are just a cope for Americans. Like, they just keep coping a bit and go, well, we don't
So Endeavor's not wrong. Endeavor's been on this stream. He's a good guy. He's a Canadian. And I watched his stuff about that, and I broadly agreed with it. I think he was dead right.
Yeah, and it is cope as well, because America's demographic situation is significantly worse than ours in almost every area.
Yep, I agree. Totally agree, Armin. I mean, what's your view on this? I mean, look, I tell you what, I used to be very anti-American. I really did. Like 20 years ago, I was extremely anti-American. And I was pretty much a normie 20 years ago. I mean, I was very anti-communist. I was fairly racially aware because of the fact I lived in South Africa. But I was very anti-American. And the thing that changed me a bit, or a lot actually, was that my son, because he's a Royal Navy dude, was actually like posted to the States for over 3 years. And when he got leave, and because he was an officer, he got reasonable leave, he traveled quite extensively there. And he's never had any, he just liked the people there. He thought they were good, you know. And my son is not an idiot, you know. He's not a twat. He can see the bad things that are happening to us. So yeah, that was partly what changed my opinion about that stuff.
My personal experience of Americans is all, with the exception of Aubrey and a couple of others, there's just mostly just been insufferable to deal with. Very loud, boisterous.
Aubrey's a very nice girl, but she is a friend of mine. So there we go. I'm being a bit biased, but yeah.
Yeah, but it's like I come across Americans on Twitter, on other platforms, and it's just like I wouldn't mind their boisterous and arrogance if it wasn't just the fact that they were world hegemon and they keep talking about Sadiq Khan and Londonistan and all this. And I'm just like thinking, as I said, sort out your own bloody pond, sort out your own bloody garden before you start chucking mud over at mine. And that's why I can't be honest with Americans. Because, well, as I said, as Michael Bummy said, Michigan's a ticking time bomb. You got Minnesota, which is basically just Somalia at this point. And I'm thinking, yeah, I'm not going to take advice from Americans about how to run my own country. And also the fact that you look at historically, the Americans have been more our enemy than the bloody Russians. When you look at foreign policy, I mean, I've just recommended a quote tweet from Stephen Edgington, a good lad over. It's pretty much on our wavelength from this point, going off what he's posted. And he's just saying, oh yeah, the American, like even Enoch Powell was right. Like the Americans are more of our enemy than the Soviets could ever be, because the Soviets are more fearful. Like, I mean, you can see like in the rhetoric of the Russians, like they still talk about us as though we're the 19th century British Empire under Lord Palmerston, rather than the gay crap show that we are now.
Oh
So
yeah,
that's
look,
kind of-
I do. You're not going to get any argument from me, Mitch, that the British government have been kowtowing too much to the Americans since about 1941 or 1942. No argument whatsoever from me on that one, mate. I will just answer Joe in the chat who says he can't see me going to Disneyland. My ex-wife wanted to take my son to Disneyland in France, and I did make an excuse to not go, I have to say. But, yeah.
Can I ask when this was?
She took him. I paid for it, but I didn't go. I just couldn't do that. Sorry, Adam, carry on, man.
I was just going to say, what year was this when your son went to Disneyland?
93? 90,
Well, I mean, France,
90.
well, it definitely would have been different back then. And France is, of course, different anyway. But maybe to jump on this American point, go to Disneyland and try and count the number of children you see compared to adults.
Oh, it's actually, now I think about it, Adam, and it was about 95, I think, actually. But yeah.
In fact, actually, people can go on Reddit and they can search Disneyland child to adult ratio. And there are threads of people talking about how it's just like millennial American man children going to Disneyland in America. I
can understand JMH. I can understand Americans thinking Churchill was a hero. He was probably more of a hero for America than he was for Britain, but then he was half American. This is the thing, And this channel is no fan of Winston Churchill, I've got to tell you, mate. But yeah, okay.
But yeah, I don't know, with the American thing, like on one hand, I'm sometimes feel like I'm very close to writing an elegy on America. There's some aspects to which I really love. There's some people that I interact with, especially in our sphere of things, that I feel a real kinship with for our sort of like shared Anglo-Saxon roots. But I mean, someone was saying in chat about social media interactions, but like there's a guy, right? When I own a Vorwerk, which is a very expensive Swiss-made Hoover, right? I think I've told this story before. And when you get it, it comes with like a service plan for like the first 3 years, and you get a guy that comes out and like cleans and services it. And the guy that comes out and services them in our area is a guy. I live in the UK. I live in Canterbury, or just outside of. And the guy that services them in our area is from Indianapolis. Like he's an immigrant. He's an American immigrant to the UK. And I'm out on the patio, and it's a lovely summer's day. This was maybe not last year, maybe the year before that. And I was sitting out on the patio, and I light up a nice cigar, and I'm sitting there smoking this cigar, and he's on the other end of the patio cleaning the Hoover out. So he's got the nice open air and that. And he's talking, and I'm just sitting there, kind of like, Ray-Bans on, just puffing away with my can of Coke next to me, just thinking, yeah, whatever. And he's going on about how, like, it's just a lot of people in America don't realize just how racist, and sexist British people are. And I'm like, yeah, probably the wrong person to talk to about this. But yeah, carry on, Chief. Cool story, bro. Just
both good things as far as I'm concerned. But, yeah.
And yeah, like it's, I don't know, like Americans on the street obviously get a lot of propaganda to sell them on this idea to sort of shame them into being more left wing. But that does shape the way that they react, both when they're leftists and when they come over to our side of things in all sorts of ways. So I don't know. I think I'd need to spend more time over there and interact with a lot more of them before I could, I don't know, really work this out. But
can I give you guys an example of why I think you sometimes get this from Americans? Is I watched the start of the Kevin Costner epic 4-film doobry that he's doing, which is it's a Western, all right? And it's called Horizon, an American saga. and it's basically all about this little town in Arizona. I think it's in Arizona. And it goes from about 1859 to sometime in the 1870s. And he's planning on doing 4 of these movies. Now, the first one is a 3-hour film, and it's very well acted. It's got beautiful scenery. I think he's got good people playing the parts. No, Yellowstone is, that's the same guy who does Yellowstone. I didn't like Yellowstone. I've got to say, I thought it was much more woke than people thought it was. Like the chicks getting more punch-ups than the blokes do in Yellowstone. But anyway, it's a good movie. It starts off with a massacre by Native Americans of this little town, and you've got the cavalry in it, and there's a wagon train, and there's all sorts of stuff. But the problem is, to me, with the movie, and I watched it with an American, by the way, with an American woman, and the problem with it to me is that it's almost like it should be a mini series, if you see what I mean. Now, the second one's supposed to be coming out in August. I don't know if it will, but it's supposed to. And then he's going to make 2 more. And it's not woke. I mean, there is a little bit of diversity in it, but it is the kind of diversity that you might have seen in the West. And it's not excessive. And it's not at all, in air quotes, woke in that sense. Although it does give the Apache American Indian side of it, the Native Americans, I guess you're supposed to call them these days. But there's no conclusion to any of these story arcs in this 3-hour story, which I found a little bit frustrating. But it's great. It's well acted. It's pretty accurate, I reckon. But the reason I mention this is the 2 characters that I noticed in it is a posh English girl who's actually very cute, I've got to say, and a posh English bloke who are lazy and don't help anyone and are terribly, terribly posh, if you see what I mean, because of course we all are. There's no such thing as a middle class or a working class English person in America, really. I mean, I have Americans tell me I have a posh accent, which I most certainly don't. But there we go. I mean, if you want to hear a posh English accent, I mean, Adam's got a posher accent than I have. And if you really want to hear a posh accent, then you've got to listen to somebody like Rupert August or Apostolic Majesty. I mean, that's a posh English accent, which is not a bad thing, by the way. It's just not the accent I have. But I've had Americans tell me I have a posh accent, which I most certainly don't, But you've got to realize that this has been going on in America for donkey's years now. Like the bad guy in American movies is almost always an Englishman,
Yeah.
If you hear an English accent in an American action film, not so much now, because these days, of course, all white men are evil in American movies these days. But back in the old days, if there was a white guy with an English accent, you knew he was the bad guy 99% of the time. So you've got to realize that. So Joe mentions Alan Rickman, absolutely, yeah. I wanted Alan Rickman to win,
and to the point that they have basically a hard-on for destroying London in every one of their sort of cape shit films or
or
whatever it is.
Yeah. Very true, very true. And yeah, I mean, Victor Claros says every English character in Hollywood is upper class, whereas, the vast majority of English people are not upper class, strange to say. Where is that true? It's not true in any nation, basically. So you do have to, when Mitch sees this anti-English and anti-British thing in America in terms of social media, I think some of that has got to do with that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, Mitchie makes a good point in the chat, which he can make himself in a minute. But yeah, I like I said, my real change of becoming much less anti-American was just talking to my son, who was posted there for 3 years because he's in the Royal Navy Fleet Air Arm, and he had to be there to learn to fly his plane and all this sort of stuff. And he got quite long leaves from time to time and traveled very extensively and just really liked the damn place, and never got into any problems. I've only been to the States a couple of times, and I certainly never ever got into any problems there at all. In fact, people were nice because they heard my accent,
I don't buy some of this stuff about how it's like a propositional nation, so it's always kind of been cucked or woke, but it does. I think a lot of this stuff came out at the turn of the 20th century, but I don't know. I don't think you can get away from the fact that that a vast majority of Americans do have, whether unconsciously or in a lot of instances consciously, have quite an anti-British and even to some extent an anti-European streak in them. Often the language allows them to romanticize Europe in all sorts of ways, but when they actually move to these places and get to know them, they can be just as anti these places they've moved to as they can, as we see them being anti-British.
I think some of it really does go back to Hollywood, to be honest with you. Like even in World War II, you saw propaganda movies that they made in World War II. And all of us will have problems with the way World War II is presented. But even in World War II, they were trying to make propaganda movies that were trying to make Americans like British people, Yes, they did. They made them. You can go and find them on the internet, even on YouTube.
But of course, as well, like Hollywood was constructed by a lot of the same groups that FDR used to construct a lot of other areas of the US government, where a lot of this modern crap people complain about comes from. So, and I mean, some of that does also predate FDR, but only by a little bit. But yeah, and that's kind of been a long running problem. But I don't know. I also worry that it's so ingrained that you couldn't remove it from them if you tried at this point. Like for example, like this was something that I forget who said this was, but they said that if you, it was someone in our sphere, but they said if you started to attack America from the right, a lot of right-wing Americans would become sort of not shitlibs, but they would align themselves with the American regime overnight from a sort of more based position. Though you kind of see this with Richard Spencer to some degree.
Oh God, the one who wants senile Biden warmonger to win the election.
Yeah, and you have seen it with some others. I mean, there are some people that I've had a lot of respect for that I've seen it even come out from them at little moments here and there. And I kind of think that if you got close to victory, if that victory implied Europe and especially Britain being loose to the American regime, a lot of those people might actually fall back into line. Because they've been twisted for several generations now. It's kind of something that quite a few of them can't get away from at this point.
Yeah, it's some of it is to copy AA. Some of it is the Boomer Truth regime for sure. But just before I ask Mitch what he thinks about this, because it was mainly with Mitch I was having this discussion. Davey1602 says, get your son out of the armed forces. I understand the need to fight for king and country. The rules have changed. He needs to know that. I've told him, mate. But you know what? My son takes as much notice of me as an adult man, and he is an adult man, as I took of my dad at the same time.
Duke's saying is as stubborn as his old man, is what he's saying.
Yeah, basically. Like my son wants to run a fleet air arm squadron, and actually his ultimate ambition is to be the captain of a warship. Now, I get it, I do, but if you don't believe I've told him about what's really going on here, Trust me, I've told him, but like, yeah, he's a stubborn bastard. You know, he really is. And I get where he's coming from. I do. You know, I worry that he's going to get killed in some fucking stupid war with Russia or China. But what can you do? He's an adult. You know, I can't tell him what to do anymore. I got him to go into the Royal Navy rather than the British Army. That was mainly me, because at the time we were fighting that absolutely ridiculously pointless war in Afghanistan, and I didn't want him to get killed there for nothing. But yeah, but trust me, I've told him that, and he even sees what I'm saying is riot in many respects.
Yeah.
He's
But
young
what else would
enough,
he do,
by
though?
the way, David.
He's
that
already
he
he's
still
already
can
put
do
time and
what he
energy
wants.
into. He's already put time and
And
energy.
he's
into
young
doing what
enough
he's
that
doing.
and he's young enough that he can be promoted to where he wants to be, and he keeps his nose clean. And one of the reasons that I am anonymous online is because of him, because me and him look quite similar. But I'll tell you, like his hero, his professional hero, is Commander Sharkey Ward, who died recently, the Harrier pilot from the Falklands War, who shot down a lot of Argentinian aircraft. And Commander Ward was never promoted because he made too many enemies in the Ministry of Defence and the British government and in the RAF, because Commander Ward was not very kind about the RAF, and I think correctly, but you know, whatever. Like every British air-to-air kill since about 1948 has been by the Royal Navy Fleet Air Arm, not by the RAF. So, you know, which is not to say I don't like the RAF, but their claims about stuff are not very accurate. But anyway, I'm going to switch this over.
Have you though, before you do switch over, has your just a small suggestion? Has your son considered tuning out? That could help his career immensely.
I don't think he has, actually. He did quite well. This is one of the reasons he's quite fond of Americans. He did quite well, you know. I mean, I think it was probably the Royal Navy officer's uniform and the accent and all the rest of it. But yeah, but he did quite well in America with American girls. So yeah, I think that's part of it. So yeah, there isn't any chance whatsoever of my son ever doing that. He's a fairly manly man, shall I say.
Just a suggestion. Well, to be honest, I mean, half the people that do tune out look like the most manliest men you've ever seen. They just put a wig on. I mean, I don't know if they develop such strong Adam's apples after they start injecting or what, but
I just hate it, mate. I think the whole troon thing. I just hate it. I don't have troons on this channel. I never will have troons on this channel, and I know there are, in air quotes, right-wing channels that have troons on, and I'm sorry, I won't do it. It's like, how can you be traditional and you don't believe in this shit and then have troons on your channel? I just don't understand that, but that's just me.
Right, so just it's not really hypothetical. I had to work with transgenders when I was in reform, in like general election. Let's say you're in my position where you're campaigning for reform in the general election, pragmatically because you wanted reform to destroy the Tories, but you had to work alongside a transgender. Would you do it, or would you just go, yep, bugger this, or you go back home in sheer protest that, you know, not accepting said transgender canvassing alongside you for a supposed, you know, base right-wing party, quote unquote?
A difficult question, Mitch. Never done it, so I don't know. But
yeah,
difficult.
I had to do. Yeah, I couldn't answer the question myself because I had to work with a transgender in terms of canvassing for reform, and that damn episode was just like taking all my willpower just to not.
Yeah, I guess you could hold your nose and just try and have as little to do with them as possible is the obvious thing that I would think. But yeah, I wouldn't be in favour of that, I've got to say. But yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you balance tightrope between pragmatism versus just clinging on to principle on a matter like that. Because I mean, it's like, for example, this transgender I was working with. I don't know what his real name was because he calls himself Helen, and I had to call him Helen because I didn't know his male name, and I'm not exactly going to ask him. But like, put it this way, very masculine looking fella. Yeah, doesn't you couldn't be forward. Apparently, he was. So he's in his mid-70s and he's been like that since age of 20. So I don't think no one at the office knew what his original name was. We just knew him as Helen. And of course, I can't. And of course, I can't like cause a scene about it because I'm thinking to myself, well,
100%, mate. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
100%. You look. The part of the reason why Anglo-Celtic British men are as good as we are is that we can make good choices. You know, like Tricky Woo in the chat says, no Scrump and Evelyn invites by me. No, never going to happen. And I'll be honest, I told Evelyn, in air quotes, I told Evelyn this on Twitter. I said, if I didn't think you were mentally ill, I might take more notice of what you said. But as far as I'm concerned, Evelyn is mentally ill. But that's just me, all right? I might even be wrong, maybe, but that is my choice, and it's my channel, and they will not appear on this channel, nor will their boyfriend, because that's gay, as far as I'm concerned. I'm sorry. But Mitch, carry on, mate. Carry on.
Yeah, I don't know if you wanted to talk about what we think Trump will actually do once back in office, because it's going to happen. He's going to get back into office. I've heard like I saw a video a while ago where these like Davos WEF types going like, oh well, Biden is such a disaster. We're going to have Trump. But the fact that the establishment were like, oh, you have to bring in Trump, Johnny tells you where the direction of travel is, where they're going to contain him, and I think they're going to be successful because. I don't know what her name is, but one of Trump's advisors, a woman, which is a bad choice anyway, told him to disavow that Project 2025 because Trump heard something about, oh, well, they're radical, you know, but no, it's pro-democracy, blah, blah, blah. And so, on one hand, you can attribute that to the boomerishness of Donald Trump, but it's also, well, if he's going to disavow Project 2025, which, as far as I would go in terms of, you know, consolidating power, like close to what Viktor Orban did in Hungary, that Project 2025 is perfectly mild compared to what I would do if I were in power. So the fact that the Don disavowed that kind of tells you, yeah, he's going to be another disappointment next 4 years.
All I could say to you, Mitch, in that before I let Alan come in, is look, Trump has recently had an assassination attempt which very nearly succeeded. Like, he was half an inch at most away from being very dead. Like, his head turned into a red mist, you know. That, I think, is quite important. He's also been under attack in terms of, well, I'll say legal, but I think actually they've been bending the rules a hell of a lot. But he's been under legal attack for the last 4 years as well. So my thinking about this is that Trump this time will be a bit tougher than he was last time. But you've got to remember that what Trump really is a 1980s Democrat, basically. And I don't think that's changed, really. But
yeah.
I do think he'll be tougher this time than he was last time. And because I believe in the same reason that I was full on supporting Farage and reform at the British general election, if I was an American, I would absolutely vote for Trump. Absolutely. Because he will do less damage. And who knows, he may do some good stuff. I mean, we can't know until he gets there. You don't think he will do any good?
There's a Serbian guy, a Serbian fan I mentioned earlier, who he reckons Trump is just actually going to continue the war in Ukraine. He doesn't think anything will change on regards to the DC stance towards Ukraine, even if Trump gets in, because you've also got JD Vance, who gobs off about how he doesn't care about Ukraine. But I mean, that guy had a transgender friend 4 years ago, and all of a sudden just turned on the guy when it's politically expedient to do so. So I just see JD Vance as a complete rat in political terms. So I don't think people should hype up JD Vance, because you look at regards to political career. I mean, he's got an Indian wife as well, so you're just going to see more H-1B visas stamped out for the Indian subcontinent. So
Look, Mitch. You know, I believe the perfect is the enemy of the good. All right, I do, and we are so far gone now that the idea that we're going to get the perfect, to me, is like fucking crazy, to be honest.
I mean, America's at 5 minutes to midnight at this point, though. So damn it.
Yeah, look,
needs something a lot better than
and
what
we're maybe 7.5 minutes to midnight. You know, but all right, Adam, what's your opinion on this stuff? All right, what do you think?
I don't really buy the whole 5 minutes to midnight stuff. I never think it's over, but well, I mean, to be honest, I'm not expecting any miracles. I was hoping through the first half of the election that he was going to be significantly harsher than he was last time, and he might actually have a bit more respect for what exactly he's up against and break through some of that stuff. When he appointed Vance as his VP, I have kind of accepted that's probably not the case, that it's probably just going to be the same as last time. But even last time,
have you noticed, Mitch? Have you noticed how much the left hate Vance?
Okay, I hate Trump, even though Trump isn't really that radical.
No, absolutely.
Hang on,
no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, have you noticed how much the left hate Vance? That's all I'm saying. Nothing else.
Sure, but Vance has actively tried to buy his way into the left over the years, which is why I don't trust him. And I don't think most people do for that same reason.
All right. I think, first of all, Steve is right here. Like, the neocons detest this guy. They really do. Also, I watched a Don the Pleb stream on Rumble. Don the Pleb, by the way, who's been on this channel, and who is a ex-US Marine Corps veteran NCO who saw action in Afghanistan. And I like him. He's a good man, I think.
Vance called Trump literally Hitler, by the way, as well.
Yeah, he did. He absolutely did. But go on Rumble and look up Don the Pleb stream on Rumble, because he's not on YouTube. Well, he puts links on YouTube, but he doesn't stream on YouTube anymore. But go on to Don the Pleb stream on Rumble, and he does like an hour stream where he looks at this Vance character and he likes some things about him and doesn't like other things about him. And on the whole, thinks he's probably a positive. All right. Now, Don the Pleb is most certainly not one of the American elites. You know, he's not. He was an NCO in the US Marine Corps. But he's a good bloke, as far as I'm concerned, anyway. And he thinks that he was probably a pretty good pick by Trump. I don't know much about this JD Vance dude. I don't. I know. Yes, he's got an Indian wife. All right. So what? I also know Colin Liddell. Right now, Colin Liddell is a guy I streamed with about 4 times before I realized he was a bit of an arsehole, to be honest. Like, it was slagging off friends of his who went back years. And Colin Liddell did an article where he just tried to character assassinate Vance, which to me made me like Vance more than I did before. But that's just me, all right? That's the way I go with these things. If you ain't loyal to a friend, I'm going to lose confidence in you, basically. Yeah, I mean, unless the friend does something absolutely ridiculous, of course. I mean, but, you know, but in general terms, you should stay loyal to your mates. And I do that, or I try to do that.
Yeah, I
I
don't
think
really.
that's the manly way to be. You know?
Yeah, you said on the whole. Oh, so what if he has an Indian wife? I mean, come on. We had an Indian prime minister, and look what happened under him. We had mass immigration galore from India. So JD Vance with his Indian wife is just going to open up the borders to more H-1B visas and
Do
more
you have
Indians.
any evidence of that, Mitch, or is it just a feeling?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm on a different planet or something. I don't know how you can look at JD Vance having an Indian wife and go, yeah, totally not suspicious. The fact that he's got an Indian wife and he's just totally just going to open up the borders to India. Like, he's
All
got a
right,
vested interest.
let me give you an example here, mate. Right, one of Colin Liddell's slag-offs of JD Vance, right, which I was like, this is just not a good argument. Okay, one of his arguments was, he hasn't got a high quality Japanese or South Korean waifu. He's got this South Indian. All right. Which to me is not an argument anyway. But why is that going to make him give more visas to Indians? I don't know that he necessarily will, to be honest. Like he married his Indian wife when he was at some very like top US university. I'm not sure that's really going to make him want to do that. It might. If he's a weak man and he just listens to his wife, it might. But is he a weak man?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know if he's a weak man, but I know him to be. But judging off his political rhetoric, he looks a complete rat. So I don't trust him. I reckon it's like Rishi Sunak wrote a paper back in 2015 telling him
Yeah, but Rishi Sunak is Indian and married an Indian wife. There was no like British bit in Rishi Sunak at all.
Look at Bob.
You know.
Yeah, and you got Bob Blackman, who's in charge of a 1922 committee in the Tory Party. He's not Indian himself, but he's practically beholden to their interests because, I'm pretty sure. I'm not sure if it's true. I've heard apparently Bob Blackman has an Indian wife. I'm not sure if that's true. Probably bollocks, to be honest. But if true, then that kind of tells you, okay, look, there's a conflict of interest. It's not the same with It's like you've got what's his name, Eric Swalwell, I believe, over in California. His wife is Chinese, and she was spying on behalf of China.
Sure.
She was. Sorry.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely, mate.
Yeah. So I don't trust people who I don't trust dual nationals in any way, shape, or form, especially when we've got and including men who've got wives who are dual nationals themselves. So
depends on the man. I think it depends on the man, but I mean, all right. We'll have to agree to disagree on that one.
JD Vance is the sort of man I'd worry about, though, in that sort of situation.
Oh yeah, Look, I have no confidence in him, Adam. I don't. But the neocons fucking hate him, right? They hate him because he's not in favor of this war in Ukraine at all. And as said,
I mean, the neocons piss me off, but I don't consider them my direct enemy. So.
Okay. Well, see, funny enough, I do. I think they're more my enemies than almost anyone else.
More than like
I think
leftists.
The neocons are. Yeah, no. I do. I think the neocons are worse than the leftists. I think it's the neocons who spend most of their time controlling the leftists. But it's only my humble opinion. Could be wrong. Could be wrong. I don't think it is, but it could be.
I mean, who would you rather have? Would you rather be in a room with Owen Jones or Christopher Hitchens? Because I'd rather have deal with Christopher Hitchens personally.
Christopher Hitchens was vile. No, I'm sorry, Christopher Hitchens was vile.
Come on, you could do hypotheticals.
All right, Christopher Hitchens spent most of his life slagging off Christians. And secondarily, and a long way behind Muslims. But he was ultimately just like a full-on neocon. He really was. Like, we have recently had discussions about his brother, Peter Hitchens. who was always a much better guy as far as I was concerned, but that was just me. And I didn't agree with Peter Hitchens' stance in the recent.
So you'd rather
British
share the room with
general
Owen
election.
Jones?
No, I would not share the room with either of them, mate.
Oh, come on,
I just
it's
say
a
both of you
hypothetical.
can get fine. No. Well, yeah, but I mean, all right. Add Douglas Murray into the mix.
Okay.
Because Douglas Murray and Christopher Hitchens were like a duet back in the day, and I'm old enough to remember it. They
So
were
which one would
often
you
on
be in
the
a room
same
with?
platform.
Owen Jones or Douglas Murray?
Neither.
No, you have to pick one. That's the whole
That's
point.
the idea of a hypothetical.
No, I can't pick one. I'm sorry. Listen, my woman tells me this is my problem. I can't do hypothetical. She always tells me this. And she's probably right. I can't because I would not speak to either of those people. I'd say, no, you're both cunts.
At some point, someone's going to
Evola's sunglasses is dead right about this. He is.
No one's doubting that though. Like that's not the point of the question.
Well, all right. I always try and say, don't let the good be the bad. Don't be the good. Be the enemy of
you
the
said,
perfect,
but
right?
you're kind of going back on yourself by not being willing to do a hypothetical.
I can't do that sort of hypothetical.
Well, you are because if you don't think
adamant, I can't do it because they're both equally bad.
Because you're looking for perfection.
No, I'm not.
By
I'm
selecting a situation that you'd be willing to accept rather than having to pick from the best of two evils.
No. What I'm trying to do, Altman, is look for someone who is slightly better than the other. Whereas if you look at these people that we're talking about, they're all equally bad. There's no good thing about any of them. That's my opinion of it. If one of them was slightly better, I would absolutely say, all right, go for that one. I still wouldn't talk to that person, but I would say, oh, yeah, they're not as bad as that one.
We're not saying you have
if
to
you're
talk to
talking
them,
about Murray and Hitchens, Christopher Hitchens, and Owen Jones, all three of those people are as bad as one another. There is no fucking difference between them.
There is a difference between them. I'm not sure if I would say that any of them are better than others, but there is definitely a difference between them.
Yeah, but it's more of a difference if you're an Israeli than if you're a Brit.
But we're not Israelis.
Exactly. So
pick Owen Jones.
No. They're all totally anti-British.
Yeah.
This is not what I'm saying. I think you guys are getting me wrong. I think
we're not getting you wrong. You won't answer it, so we can't get you anyway.
And I think Douglas Murray and Christopher Hitchens are as anti-British as Owen Jones is.
Can we just drop this and talk about Leeds, something actually British?
All right, then. Yeah, for
I'll
sure.
give you an escape for a change.
Oh, God, we have to talk about gypsies now.
And Pakistanis, but yeah.
Well, Bengalis, which are the same anyway, so deport.
Yeah, pretty much the same thing, yeah. They're all aliens, basically.
Yeah, Bengalis
don't like it.
Yeah, Bengalis don't like it when you compare them to Pakistanis, because apparently they had one war back in the 70s or something where they tried to genocide each other, but I don't care, they're the same.
They've been doing it since 1948, Mitch.
1948, but that's putting it mildly. I mean, try when Islam entered the place. What is it, like 9th century?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can go back to ancient times. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, why do we have towns in Britain that are so totally alien to Anglo-Celtic British people, where they're burning and people are rioting, and the only person that British cops arrest is some British woman in her slippers? You know, that's the only person they arrest.
Yeah. As of last night, as of this morning, I think they did arrest 5 other people, but I don't know the exact details about them. But yeah, as of last night, they'd only arrested one woman, a white woman, for antagonizing protesters. There is a video of her actually in the act of this, so you can go and see it
Wasn't
for
she
yourself.
just trying to protect her house?
No, I think she was standing there with her arms crossed, and I think she was basically giving them abuse for, like, you know, setting fire to the neighborhood, basically. How dare
Terrible.
she?
Terrible.
How dare she?
Yeah,
How dare she stop those
dare
fiery
you?
but mostly peaceful
Yeah.
protests?
Jesus Christ. And the British police arrested her, no doubt because she was the softest target there, and the British police are not very tough.
Well, because
You've
she's
gotta
white.
say
At the end of
they're
the
not.
day, if that had been like gammons, you know, taken to the street, the police wouldn't have backed down. They would have sent in the army if they had to.
Don't know how well that would have gone, but they could have tried it. Yeah.
Mm.
I still have my doubts about I still think a lot of British soldiers would not be very happy about being nasty to actual Anglo-Celtic British people. I think the government even is very nervous about that.
No, I think I'm not sure whether the British Army, in the sense that, because I mean the army's been sanitised since was it 73 when Queen Lizzie frustrated the coup, and ever since then the British Army's just been largely sanitised of any sort of
Mate,
actual
I
dissident.
was in the British Army in '83, 10 years after that, and trust me, the British Army was still the British Army. All right?
You're talking about rank
I
and
was
file
actually
generals.
serving in it. And
The generals who would have probably done as they're told.
No. Look, I'm not
fire.
talking about generals. All right, I'm talking about the British Army. In 1983, the year after the Falklands War, by the way, the British Army was still the British Army, and no government would have used it against Anglo-Celtic British people because you just couldn't. Could they now? Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. I think
Well, the
they're
British
still
Armed Forces are like
likely.
99% white now. So it's still
Yeah,
as white as
exactly.
it
Even
was.
today, it's still mostly white. Yeah, I think even today the British government.
But the
is
police
not
force is also very
confident.
white.
Yeah, but it's
not 99%, but it's very white.
But it's
I mean,
not,
you can go
it's
and
not
look
the same
at,
though, Armin. It's not the same. It's not,
because they go through a lot of like civil training courses that the army
Yes,
didn't
they
used to
do.
do. But
Yeah,
I imagine that the army does do a lot of that stuff now on new recruits.
Yeah,
It's like
but
if you
there's
get
a lot
caught
of
in
common
London, you get
purpose.
chucked out from the army these days.
Guys, there's a lot of common purpose courses that British policemen go through that no one in the army does. All right. Now, I am not saying there are not woke people in the military. There are. There absolutely are. But they're a very small minority. And the political guys that push out all this LGBTQ, in air quotes, diversity bullshit, they're very senior officers. If you sent a company of infantry to go and do something, I wouldn't trust. If I was a lefty British government like the one we have now, and like the one we had before the election, because they're the same government basically, anti-Anglo-Celtic, anti-British, I wouldn't trust them to do something against British people, which is one of the reasons I suspect they won't use them.
No,
One of the things that is true is the lower down you go in the military, the less woke they are.
Okay, sorry.
Go on, Mitch.
I was going to say, yeah, I think this is where AA has a point with elite theory, where all you need to do is control the top sections of society, and that's all you need. I mean, look at our society, the gay race communists who rule the society today. They're a small minority, but it doesn't matter. They hold all the power, they hold all the cards. So it won't matter what the rank and file say, we'll just do as ordered. That's just the banality of evil.
And
but they won't obey those. People won't always obey those orders, Mitch.
They'll only disobey if there's like a counter elite that they can line up behind, but there isn't, or at least there isn't one we can see in the military. or
No, look.
look,
I'm
can
gonna
I
have
just
to
say,
I've got to
I
disagree
tried
with
to
you.
join. I tried to join the Royal Marines over a decade ago, probably close to a
Mhm.
decade and a half at this point. I couldn't because of a medical condition I had, but I went to an open day. I went to like an army recruitment, a military recruitment open day,
Sure.
and I spoke with a guy there that was actually in the Royal Marines, and it didn't totally put me off at the time, but it did kind of sour me a little bit. Where he was basically saying, "Oh, I'm not fighting for country for like some." I forget what he said, but like he was basically implying like he kind of viewed like working class white van men as like scum of the earth. He goes, I'm fighting to
basically.
I'm fighting to make to improve the lives of like basically people in the third world. And
Yeah.
I was
So
like,
you met a
this
cunt,
is pretty cringe. It was in the Royal Marines though.
Yeah, you met a cunt, mate. Do you know what? Every military service has people like that, sadly, but they're not the majority.
He was an officer.
Well, there you go. That's all you needed to know. But yeah, I mean, look, the way most companies work is they have a young lieutenant or sometimes a captain in charge of them. And if it's a captain, it's a bit more experienced. And they have 3 platoons. Each one is under a second lieutenant. And all of those platoons have a platoon sergeant. And if the second lieutenant has any brain whatsoever, he basically listens to his platoon sergeant, who has like 15 to 20 years service, where he has like, maybe a year or two. And even the company commander will normally have, I don't know, 5 or 6 years service. But his company sergeant major will have probably 20 years service, and even he takes notice. It's more complicated than civilians think it is. And the lower down you go in the armed forces, the less, in air quotes, because I hate this word, woke, but you guys all know what it means. You guys here and you guys in the chat. The less woke it really is, all right? And that's the truth. And if I was a British government globalist bastard like Keir Starmer or Richie Sunak, they're interchangeable. There's no difference between them at all, in my opinion. I wouldn't trust those guys at the company level. And those guys at the company level are the guys who you need to enforce your will. And I wouldn't trust them at all. And I think they'd be right not to, because I don't think that most British soldiers, even today, will open fire on Anglo-Celtic people. I just don't think they will. And I'm pretty sure the British government knows that, which is why they don't use them. Like the cops, the British police, totally different story. They are so like propagandized and brainwashed as they join the cops. That's a totally different story. They can't do that with the forces. And actually, they're trying to do it less now because they're trying to get us ready to go and fight the Ruskies or the Chinese,
When you've argued with a guy who says that can't put the woke away because it's too far along. So I got somewhere. I find it funny how, like, you say that you're more jaded and cynical compared to me and Ataman, but we're more jaded and cynical in regards to the armed forces than you are.
Well,
I don't know what you say.
Could be because I served in the armed forces and I want to think
quite a while ago, though.
Yeah, but my son's still serving, Adam. But yeah, it could be that. You may be right. You may be right.
I mean, I don't think the elite will deploy the army because I think they're ultimately quite, like they're not lions. Not to use a really overly used
they're foxes, yeah,
metaphor, yeah, and they are kind of they do shy away from using raw power. They occasionally have little glimmers of steel where they will they will wield their weapons, but it's quite rare.
Yeah, and it has to
but-
be like a pregnant women, or some woman in her slippers, or some guy who was putting up anti-immigration stickers. It can't go too far because then they'd be scared.
I mean, not to drag this back to America, but there's a certain synthesis between like the Little Rock Nine, where airborne soldiers like led white Americans through the street at bayonet point, versus not versus, but in later relation to like Waco. I mean, that's a regime that is actually that, despite also having foxes in it quite often, is actually very willing to use extreme amounts of force against its own citizens, as long as they're white. So on that grounds, I can't rule it out here, even though
I don't rule it out. I just think it's unlikely. And if they try, I think it might come unstuck. Like Raw Biscuits in the chat says, loyalty has been trained into me.
True.
Well, you know what? It was, but it was trained into me by my dad, not by the army. Because men are loyal. That's what we are, It's why we like dogs, because dogs are loyal,
I like
my dad trained me to be loyal. You're supposed to be loyal to your friends. That is one of the most important things for a man. All right? It wasn't military you trained that into me. That's nonsense. I was loyal long before that. But I'm not loyal to the military in a stupid way. I'm not saying maybe they could do it. Yeah, maybe they could. But
there's probably people in the army now, though,
if
that
I
are
was
loyal to
in
it
charge of the
way.
military, I wouldn't risk it. Is all I'm saying. I wouldn't risk it because I don't think their nonsense has gone as low as some of you guys might think it has. In the cops, yeah, absolutely it has. It's to every PC, basically. But in the military, nah, not so much.
I mean, you can still find a lot of based coppers, but it doesn't matter because the hierarchy and the infrastructure works the way it does to keep those people pigeonholed and to utilize force in one direction. And that's kind of my worry about what the army's been transformed into, especially in the last 10 years.
I don't disagree with you, mate. And you will have seen me post many things on the Discord, etc., about the modern British Armed Forces, which I detest. All right, you will have seen it. I do it all the time. I'm still not sure that your Starmers and Sunaks can totally rely on the privates of B Company of the Princess of Wales's Royal Regiment. You know what I mean? That's all I'm saying.
I'm going off my personal experience when the Royal Monmouthshire Regiment was recruiting near me. They weren't marketing joining the army based on, join the army to on a very tribal, ethno-nationalist reasoning. They were just like, join us so that you can get better career prospects. But instead just saying, join us so you get a better look on your CV. That's their marketing for the army these days. And I was like 20. Yeah, that was like just under 3 years ago. So
they were training some of the Ukraine troops here in Kent. I think it was at Folkestone, but I actually thought Folkestone had been closed down. Anyway, they covered it on the local news. And I don't know if these guys were just putting on a really good show for the cameras, but some of those, I mean, admittedly, I think these were all British Army officers, but some of the conviction that they spoke with, and that he was literally saying like, "Oh, we all wish we were there on the front lines with you, fighting the Russians together." That was literally something they said. So I'm not. I wouldn't trust them.
All right. All I can say to you guys is I've actually asked my son this question, right? And my son is a medium-ranking officer in the Royal Navy these days. Okay, medium, right? And I said to him, if you were told and ordered and the Navy do stuff like this as well as the Army, and the Air Force would as well. Trust me. I asked my son, I said, if you were ordered by the government to open fire on real Anglo-Celtic British people, would you do it? And my son said to me straight, no. And like I say, he's a medium-ranking officer. Like if he was in the Army, he'd be like somewhere between a captain and a major. And he just said no. I said, would your men do it? And he said, no, I don't think they would. That was what I was told. And that was like within the past 2 years.
I'm gonna. So you have 1991 coup d'etat where like you have the Russians nearly had a coup d'etat where the Soviet hardliners took over. The soldiers in that disobeyed their orders and joined up with Yeltsin because there was a counter elite to fight against those Soviet hardliners. What? Okay, let's say your son was told, okay, he has to order his the guys below on a Type 42 destroyer, for argument's sake, to open fire on a crowd in Westminster protesting against.
He would never do it. He would never do it. He'd refuse.
Yeah, but that's the thing. He would just be turfed out, and someone else would take his place. Like that's a problem. Like he just like he would just be one brick taking over structure.
It's not as simple as you think, Mitch, because if he refused, the person under him, who he would have been training and been in charge of, would respect him if he was any good, which he is, and would also say, no, I'm not doing that either. It's more complicated than you think.
Yeah, I doubt that.
Because the military is a hierarchical system, it is more complicated than you think, mate. It is.
Like plenty of other systems we've got below very hierarchical. Like you could argue the civil service and the police force was a hierarchical. Yeah, that doesn't stop them from being so intrinsically paused to the point where they will act as a janissaries of a regime we live under. So,
all I would say to you, mate, is that being in the British Armed Forces, which I have served in, is a bit different from being in the cops or the civil service. It is. Like, it has to be, because you have to face external enemies. All right? You do. And look, you could be right, but I don't think you are. And I think the British government is very well advised not to try and use the British Armed Forces against the real British people. And I think
full well
is why you never see it. You never see it. Right?
Okay, as real biscuits are so much, it depends on how it's framed to the soldiers. Like, let's say we were to go protesting and there were cops beating down on us, we responded in kind, and it was all framed as, oh, look at us, neo-Nazis uprising in Westminster, threatening to coup the government. That's what they would tell the soldiers, and the soldiers will then fire upon us because they've been told like that way.
I don't think you could trust the army. I don't think you could trust the army or the Royal Marines even then, mate. I really don't.
I don't. I reckon when it boils down to it, there's no counter elite to go against.
What do you base that on? What do you?
I mean, look at historical example. I told you the Soviet Union in 1991 with that coup. The soldiers could afford to disobey because they had a counter elite to rally towards in the form of Yeltsin.
British soldiers.
You don't have that in this country.
Soviet soldiers, but okay. I don't think that will happen, mate. I really. If I was the British government, the very last thing I would ever do, and I'd only do it if I was about to get killed, would be to try and use the British Armed Forces. Because I don't think they're reliable at all in the lower ranks. And the lower ranks are the guys who actually have to fire.
You know, there's an old saying by Napoleon that goes...
It's not General so-and-so or Admiral so-and-so or Air Marshal so-and-so who has to open fire. It is Joe Bloggs, it's you and me, and a second lieutenant who's maybe been there for a couple of years, all right? And I wouldn't rely on those guys if I was these anti-British elites who run us at the moment, you know, be it Starmer or be it Rishi Sunak. They're the same, basically. If they actually have to come down to relying on those guys, I think they're almost like overthrown, basically.
I will say,
Because I don't think you can rely on. Look, I might be foolish, all right? I might be. But you know what? My mates and I told to open fire on a load of Anglo-Celtic people, especially with loads of women and kids and stuff. We would never, ever have done that. We would have never done it, mate.
Right.
We would never have done it. We would just have said no, sir.
Right.
I don't
imagine
think
Ataman.
we've deteriorated that much. I don't.
Right. Ataman has probably heard this quote, so I think he'll agree with me when I said, over the age of 40, people probably, like, I'd say people over the age of 40, including you, Duke, I'd say that there's a point where you're unwilling to have imagination because it's in something. So, for example, there's you, Duke. You served in the army, sure, but that's 40 years ago. And it's like sometimes like you'll say about, oh, well, you think there's more hope in the normies than guys like me do, in terms of the normies. So I just think I won't be surprised. It's just you don't want to have that. You have that lack of imagination because you just don't want to imagine that we really are. That the country has really turned that bad that you could unironically see British Army soldiers. Now, keep in mind, 2018, you had that Tommy Robinson meeting with Army cadets. Okay. You get stuff like that, as well as in 2019, you had Jeremy Corbyn photos being used as target practice by sidearm British Army soldiers. But the fact of the matter is, if push comes to shove, a lot of our soldiers will just do simply as they're ordered because there's no other alternative for them. Like it's not just them; the families will also be punished because as much as our regime is foxes, they'll also resort to the Soviet tier method, like they did with Sam Amelia, to beat down on us.
All right. I'm going to answer Raw Biscuits. Raw Biscuits said, "Did I serve in Ireland?" Yeah, I did 2 tours in Northern Ireland. I did a regular tour in Belfast, and I did a Roman tour in what we used to call Bandit Country, which was much more fun, by the way. Actually on the border with Southern Ireland. Did I aim and fire at an Irishman? Yes, I did, and I think I killed one. But so what? You know,
I think Raw Biscuits is just trying to fill out his bingo card.
All right. What I didn't do, I never opened fire on women and children, never once. Nor would most of my mates. They just wouldn't have done it.
Right, but hang on. Now we're moving the
now
we're moving the goalposts a little bit though.
Are we? Okay, yeah. You explain, mate.
Because you've gone from saying you wouldn't fire on like people to saying you wouldn't fire on women and children. And the thing is, as well, like the example doesn't even imply that you have to actually fire on people. Like they could still use non-lethal means, which would be a way that they'd probably sell it to them.
Oh, okay. So what you're talking about, like plastic bullets and tear gas and
tasers, sort of beanbag shotguns. Yeah, tear gas.
I wouldn't have done any
cannons.
of those things.
Those things. As we've said, that's a long time ago.
Yeah, but I don't know that you have any evidence that the vast mass of the British Army is much worse. I mean, it probably is a bit worse, but I don't think it's much worse. And my point is, and I'll repeat this for the 3rd time, if you're Sir Keir Starmer or your Indian banker, Sir Rishi Sunak, I'm sure you'll be Sir Rishi Sunak soon. I wouldn't rely on these people because I don't think you can. That's my point. I don't think you can. JMH is asking me my opinion of the Russians. Do you hate them? No, I don't hate the Russians at all. I actually think the Russians have a very, very good case in Ukraine. I think the Russians should take over the oblasts that they're fighting for, because those oblasts are mainly inhabited by Russian people who want to be Russian. So no, I don't have any hatred for the Russians whatsoever, none. But no, I never met a British soldier who had any hatred for the Russians. So, why
A
not?
little while back, Oswolf in the chat said, question to the panel, do you think at the start of C-19 when the government what do you think, why do you think the at the start of the C-19 did the government back down on using the army on roadblocks?
Because they were sensible. That's my view, because the army would be not very good at that, because they wouldn't want to do it.
No?
I don't think the army would want to do it, no.
What, from pride, or do you think, like, why would they not want to man roadblocks? They think it would be beneath them, or?
But because the British army is not designed to control British people. It's not. It's made up of British people. I think this is one of the reasons, like the guys in America who think the American army is going to be set loose against like original stock Americans is going to come unstuck, because most of the guys in the infantry and in the airborne and in the
but they did do it in
the US
against,
Marine Corps
against
won't
original
do
stock
that.
Americans
They just
in Little
won't.
Rock.
Sorry, mate. I beg your pardon. When did they do
that? The airborne did actually get deployed against like white Americans in Little Rock back during the forced busing era, right after the Brown v. Board of Education case.
And they were happy to do it, were they?
Well, they seem to be. I mean, they did it with a fair amount of
I don't know
seriousness.
anything about that case, mate. So
yeah, they marched people down the streets at bayonet points, and a few people did get bloodied up when they sort of wouldn't move, and the airborne would sort of set upon them, give them a swift, crack to the head.
Like I said, I don't know anything about that, mate.
I think this is partly why they want to pause the army and the police, is because they want foreigners in those forces who will dispatch, who will be more willing to dispatch violence
100%.
Against natives.
I agree with that.
But
yes,
and they've been unable to do that. But I still wouldn't trust either of those forces to not just use violence anyway in a desperate situation.
I agree with all of that. I did this. I can answer, because this I've actually looked into. Tomb of Arminius says, currently reading a book on the Eureka stockade. The British soldiers that saw the stockade are Dewey. They didn't disagree with the diggers, but they attacked our Dewey. All right, now this is something I've actually read about. It happened not many miles away from where I live. I've been there, and I've been to the cemetery where the diggers and the British soldiers who were killed were all buried. All right, so I actually know something about this. The thing about the Eureka stockade that no one talks about is that it was very anti-British. It was basically Irish guys and Americans who were in the Eureka stockade. All right, and many of the Americans were actually Irish, but whatever. You got to realize that for a start. Okay, this is one of the reasons there is this thing in Australia, which is not as strong as it used to be, but it was very strong in the early 20th and even mid 20th century. There was this thing of a separation between Anglos in Australia and Irish people in Australia, partly because when Australia first started and up until the 1840s, some Irish nationalists were like exiled to Australia. This stuff has pretty much died out now in 2024, but it was a pretty big deal. Even in the fairly late 20th century, it was still a thing, it was going on. This separation between Irish Australians and British Australians. And it was partly because some Irish nationalist terrorists, and to my point of view, they were terrorists, were sent to Australia up until I'm not sure if it was the late 1840s or the early 1850s, somewhere around then. That's when it stopped. To Western Australia was the last place. And that's what that's got to do with. But the Eureka Stockade thing, like I said, it was Irish guys and some American guys who were probably mostly Irish, I suspect. And two of them in said there were Germans. Well, maybe. I don't know. Don't think there were all that many Germans in Australia back then. But all right. But yeah, that's what was going on there. It was this division. I'm not sure. Like, that wouldn't work anymore, I don't think. Because one of the things I've noticed, even in the 24 years I've been in Australia, is that Anglo-Irish division has become less and less the more other mass immigration has come into Australia. But, maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe it's just me. It's my opinion.
I mean, Mitch said in the chat, Romans did that too. They never stationed Gauls and Hispanians in Britain. They did deploy Greeks, Germanics, and Illyrians against us 2,000 years ago. Yeah, I mean, even in Rome particularly. I mean, this is a point that Bertrand de Juvenel, degenerate Frenchman that he is, makes in On Power, that the Praetorian Guard was made out of Germanics, even though it was stationed almost exclusively in Rome.
Not originally, but eventually.
No. Yeah. And of course, even the Vatican City is guarded by the Swiss Guard. Not an Italian unit, but literally another foreign unit. I don't think those divisions now would be enough, because there's like a broader European unity in the way that those individual groups weren't quite as, but of course this was something that was probably more prominent all the way back then.
Look, I think we can even look at Britain and Ireland these days, and there are many Irish nationalists today who are not particularly anti-British. They're just anti-turning the whole of Ireland into Somalia or whatever, and they're not particularly anti-British. They're just, we kind of like Ireland for the Irish. And I think that's a good thing. Some of these ancient and often, how can I put it, often artificially promoted animosities are disappearing now, as we all face the same threats. I'd like to see 1,000 Irishmen marching against an illegal alien hotel or something like that. Good on the Irish for doing that,
Yeah, before we get back to this Hare Hills thing in Leeds, what is the state of Anglos as an identity in Australia? Do Australians still broadly see Britain as sort of like a mother country, or do they kind of laugh in the face of that idea?
I don't think they laugh in the face of it. I think there are many. Look, the Anglo-Celtic Australians are still they're still the biggest majority in Australia.
Because not to round this back to our American conversation from earlier, but I've definitely found that I get a lot more Anglo positivity from. Anglo positivity sounds so fucking gay, but you know what I mean, more pro Anglo views from Australians who are like right wing, who are in our circles, than I do from Americans in our circles.
I think there's a recognition in Australian nationalist circles that Australia is an Anglo-Celtic country. There is definitely a recognition of that, which is not to say that Australian nationalists reject Italian or Greek Australians, for example, which we don't, not at all. But there is a recognition that at base, Australia is an Anglo-Maori country because, it is. It was founded by Captain Cook and Captain Phillips,
Anyway, though, we should probably get back to Leeds because we didn't talk about that much before we
Go for it.
side round.
Go for it.
Well,
Go
I mean,
for
I don't really know what to say about it that hasn't already been said by other people. I'm not really exactly sure of the timeline. I don't know if you have a better grip of this, but was it started by Roma, but then it turned into essentially a Roma versus Pakistani conflict, or a Roma versus
I think it was
Mirpuri conflict.
But Mitch was the first guy that brought this to my attention, so I'll fall back on Mitch for this one. But yeah,
it was kickstarted by 5 gypsy children being taken away by the state because the parents were abusing them and including throwing one to the floor, like full-on wrestling move, but not play fighting, like kind of move that could cause brain damage. So 5 children were taken away, and everyone in that gypsy part of Leeds just went apeshit at the police. I mean, you got that Muslim. Is he the mayor or the council or something?
He's a Green Party councillor. You're talking about
Yeah.
Ali Mothin or whatever his name is, or Mothin Ali, I should say.
Mitch, can I ask you, like, is this like a British gypsy thing, or was it like immigrant gypsies? I thought it was kind of immigrant gypsies.
Is there a difference? I mean, all gypsies are ultimately from us Indians.
Yeah. I understand that, mate. But weren't these gypsies from somewhere in like the Balkans or something?
I mean, people think the gypsies are all from Romania because they're called Roma. They call themselves Roma, which I don't know why.
Sure.
So I mean, I didn't bother looking into that whether they come from Romania or not. I mean, so many people are saying they're Romanian because people can't tell the difference between Romani and Romanian. Now, I think the gypsies call themselves Romani because, well, the Romani is actually what the Romans call themselves. That's what the Romans call themselves, Romani. I think the gypsies just do it just so they can LARP as European. I don't think. Yeah, but there's nothing about them that's actually European. So it doesn't matter whether immigrants or come from Romania or Hungary or Slovakia or wherever. Like, I actually find it funny. There's some American shitlib Reddit retard who couldn't understand why we hate gypsies so much. Like they say, "Oh yeah, you." I don't understand that. I mean, because it's like this one American who was like basically Reddit retard, and he was just going, "Why do Europeans hate gypsies so much?" Because he was just going off all the. He was going off even not some of these centrist types of Lib Dem kind of voters, just like fed posting about the gypsies in Leeds, and I'm just sat there thinking, yeah, you're detestable as a group, really, when you've got Lib Dem voters fed posting about you. Put it that way. So, I have the American guy. I don't know what his name was. I didn't bother taking notes. I have that guy who understands why we hate gypsies so much. Some people say Tyson Fury. Tyson Fury is Irish traveller. He's not gypsy. Irish traveller, which is different kettle of fish. They're essentially just Irish people who are forced to live nomadically because of Oliver Cromwell. So they're not the same as the gypsies.
Okay, so when did because it's not all Roma there, is it? Because the Roma population in Hare Hills is not massive. When did other groups start getting tied up with this?
Well, you saw a massive crowd outside the police cars as they were taking the children away. So it wasn't just. I can't tell the difference between gypsies and Pakistanis because we all look the same. So I can't tell you for certain what. Yeah, they probably just got involved just because they want to scrap, and also because, And you can also imagine the Pakistanis are probably just thinking, oh, well, if they take away the gypsy children, how long before the state takes away ours because X, Y, and Z? Because you had some Owen Jones types, not Owen Jones himself, but some types who flock around him going, oh, yeah, we must take away all the children from the Muslims to train them all, basically. And I'm just sat there thinking, you do that. And
that ain't
I'll
going
watch
to
it
go
with
well if
popcorn.
they try it. That's not going to go well if they try it.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine Ataman and I would just be up a sideline, just getting my feet up on the fireplace and just eating popcorn, just watching it all.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So would I be, by the way. But I mean, look, I got to tell you this. My old man, who was born in 1933, by the way, in the 1950s, used to go hop picking, which was a traditional Cockney thing to do in Kent, yeah, where all the hop fields were. And when he did that, a lot of the guys who used to do that were called diddy coys, okay, and they were some sort of gypsies, but they'd been in Britain for a very, very, very long time. And they were pretty tough, but according to my old man, they were all right, you know. So, again, I don't know. I'm asking you guys what you know about that.
I suppose diddy-coy is a word of your end. I thought it was only a word of our end, because I've heard of that word before in my neck of the woods.
That's what my old man used to call them. He used to say they were diddy-coys.
Yeah, because I know the gypsies.
And you're into language, Mitch, so you're the guy to ask about this.
No, because I actually looked because I looked it up when because Peaky Blinders use that word, and apparently so the gypsies themselves will use diddy-coy for anyone who's half gypsy, half native Brit, whatever word you use.
That sounds about the way my dad used to talk about them. So halfway, yeah, fair enough. That sounds all right, man.
Yeah,
I think you're right.
Yeah, that's the way the gypsies use it. They just use it. It's basically like diddy-coy is kind of like a better way of saying mulatto or mixed race, kind of like that's pretty much what it means in my language. But yeah,
I always thought, from listening to my dad's stories of when he used to go hop picking with these guys and stuff, it was very much like the kind of guys. Do you remember that movie? What's his name did the American actor where he was fighting everyone. Man.
Well, Green Street.
What's his? No. The guy who all the chicks like. The guy who all the chicks like. You know. It was a British film. What's his? I can't even remember his name now.
Like, I thought you were going to make Green Street for a second, man, because it's all your wood.
Thank you, Oswald. Brad Pitt. Do you remember that Brad Pitt movie where he played the kind of gypsy type bloke who got in fights with everybody? It was a good film. It was actually a pretty good film.
I'll look it up. I won't be supposed to
Snatch. Thank you, Sonny Jim. It's called Snatch. It's a pretty good
film. I haven't watched
that bloody
age.
That was the sort. Well, when my dad told me these stories about going hop picking in the 1950s with these diddy-coy guys, Snatch is exactly what it reminded me of. And I think you're right. It's like probably kind of 50-50 guys, you know, like you were saying, Mitch.
Yeah. No, I can't.
Yeah, I think that's watch that movie. It's pretty good, actually. I thought it was pretty good. Brad Pitt's accent wanders a bit sometimes, but apart from that, it's pretty good. Someone's asking me what part of UK do I hail from, mate. I used to live when I was, let me think, about 9 years old. I lived 5 minutes walk from the south side of Tower Bridge. 5 minutes walk. but on the south side of London. So my old man taught me so much Cockney rhyming slang. I can make up whole paragraphs of Cockney rhyming slang because my dad knew it. And these days, of course, the original Anglo-Celtic, English, and British Cockneys are just about an extinct species, unless you go to Essex. And I'm sure people like Outman would find there are some in his town, but all of them have pretty much left London now. Apart from anything else, there's no work in London anymore, unless you're a financial guy or want to do Uber or something like that.
Yeah, slight change. You want me to screen share this? Because there's this new Professor Becky Francis woman who's she's been appointed by Labour to rewrite the curriculum for children. I don't know if. I'll
this is the one that was on the Discord, isn't it, Mitch?
Yeah.
Yeah, by all means, screenshot it. Yeah, screenshot it. She's like a feminist fanatic that Labour have just put in charge of writing the British school curriculum, and she is an absolute feminist socialist fanatic. But you know, what a surprise! Like Sir Keir Starmer is pretty socialist. I don't know how anyone believed he wasn't, but yeah.
You have this. I was going to say. Yeah, that's her published works. So you generally get the gist of what she stands for in terms of
feminism, anti-white male, feminism, socialism, feminism, anti-white male. Yeah, that's all she is. She ain't a good person to be in charge of this shit. Not at all.
Yeah, it's gonna get.
But that's what you get from the Labour Party, you know.
Yeah, so things are gonna get a lot. I mean, I'd love to see just probably summed it up best where, okay, so we might get nationalised railways, and Keir Starmer might crack down on illegal immigration, but by and large, the next 5 years are going to be painful in terms of dealing with Labour.
I believe so. Yeah, I believe so.
I'm going to say, like, they're talking about planning reform for stuff like wind turbines and houses. In other words, areas like mine, which are part of the Green Belt, we're going to get a lot of houses built in my local area. Because, you know why? Because it's like, so my MP is a NIMBY Tory party MP, like Gavin Williamson. Very NIMBY fella, because of course he knows the people who voted for him, all boomer NIMBYs. And that's why I'm going to accept my area to get a lot of houses built, because that's what Labour do. The main power, they punish constituencies like mine for having voted in said NIMBY Tory party types. And I don't know what it's going to be like for South East of England, because by and large, the Green Belt is the only thing that's stopping this country just from becoming like a massive urban sprawl akin to Coruscant from Star Wars fantasy universe, where it's just all urban sprawl, like no wildlife, no forests, nothing. We're all just urban sprawl.
100%, mate. 100% agree. Can I just say, Mitch, can I just say before we go on, Bolero 393 is saying YouTube has disgracefully booted the Franklin, who is one of the best Australian YouTubers, by the way. I've got to tell you guys, I spoke to the Franklin on Twitter, /X, earlier today, and he's not feeling very well at the moment, but I did invite him on this show, all right? So if anyone wants to know what's happening with the Franklin, yes, his YouTube channel was removed by YouTube. I have no idea why, but I've been trying to get the Franklin on air for a couple of weeks, but haven't been able to. But I am trying, gents, just so you know. All right, I beg your pardon, Mitch. Carry on.
I was going to say, just continuing what Will basically saying. Yeah, my area it's basically, I mean, there's some greenery nearby where we live, but given what's going to happen, my area is just going to become a suburb of Birmingham, the way we're going with this Labour government. And that's what I'm going to expect. Like the greenery near me. I mean, I live right next to an area of outstanding natural beauty in the form of caricature, so I might be spared in some ways, but there's a lot of green fields near
I
me,
hope
and I'm going to
so,
expect them
mate.
to get
I
built
hope
upon.
so.
Well,
I
torn down a
hope
lot of
you are
trees.
spared.
For Cannock Chase, yes, but there's still plenty of green areas near me that are going to get built upon, and yeah, it's still going to get pretty bad. They won't build on Cannock Chase itself, I think, just because it's AOMB. Although they're torn down a lot of trees near my section of Cannock Chase for some reason I don't know. So they've already done. So the council's already done its kind of damage to my section of Cannock Chase, unfortunately. But yeah,
Mate, all these guys who are for infinity mass immigration don't give a shit if there's no British countryside left at all. They don't care. They
yeah,
just want to build over everything.
It's like, ironically, right, I can find my bloody Greens more amenable on this because I say to them, okay, well, you can't keep building houses forever because, for example, I attack them on the wildlife thing. So in 1975, we had 35 million hedgehogs in this country. As of 2015, so nearly 10 years ago, we have fewer than a million. We have fewer than a million hedgehogs left because they keep building over bloody habitats and screwing them over. So
yeah, no, I've heard that, mate. I used to when I lived in West Sussex, when I was at home with my dad as a teenager, like we used to feed hedgehogs in our back garden. Like, you know, you put out a bit of mince and some milk. That's what they used to like. And these hedgehogs would come every evening, and it was really like the noises they made when they were eating was really cute, actually. But yeah, it was really common. But apparently now, not so much.
Yeah, I had one hedgehog in my garden. That was like 2 years ago. I haven't seen hide nor hair with him since, and I'm far more likely to see a
Apparently,
hedgehog
the
run over.
mince and milk is what they like, Mitch. Apparently, but we used to get like 3 or 4 of them, and when they were all eating, it was like really cute. And me and my dad and my younger brother, we'd stand out there. We keep our dog inside, of course, and we'd stand out there, and it was just so cute to hear these little animals eating away, you know.
Yeah, and it's meanwhile, I came across one hedgehog like 2 years ago. He regularly was in my garden, and ever since then, I haven't come across any hedgehogs. In fact, I've probably seen more hedgehogs in my life on the roads than in my garden. Well, that's kind of like a black pill. But I mean, it's quite something now. Well, I mean, as I said, it's going to get depressing when we're just going to see more Milton Keyneses built all over the blue place. But it's also, well, I think Jonathan on Twitter said this is why anyone in this country needs to get involved in local politics ASAP. So the amount where you've got, you can engage with people and frustrate a lot of these building projects as best you can. But they still might overrule you, but you still built up those local connections on behalf of the NIMBY stuff.
One of the things I would say, Mitch, is that like hedgehogs are British, you know. Hedgehogs are British. Hedgehogs in your garden are British. But none of these immigrants will ever understand that for 1 second. They never will. Just like they won't understand that robins in your garden are British. You know? They just won't get it. You can't teach that. You have to grow up with it, you know?
Yeah, and I don't know what to make of that, but because Royal British also said, oh, yeah, the rental market is also looking set to get screwed over by Labour because they've pretty much just went, because by the looks of it, Labour's also declared war on the landlords, which I mean, I'll be honest, I don't really believe in landlording if I'm going to be honest, because I mean it's only recently, the last 70-odd years, we've seen housing as a commodity. So I prefer to see people owning their own houses, but I mean there's no reason why we should screw over landlords like what Labour government's doing. I don't know what to make of that.
Can I just say that Oswald in the chat is talking about, presumably going back to the hedgehog conversation, like one of the main things hedgehogs eat is slugs and snails. So if you're a gardener, a hedgehog is a very good thing in your garden.
Yeah, I have tons in my garden.
Yes, same.
Any cat food that doesn't get eaten, I leave it outside and they hoover it up.
So do you get hedgehogs in your garden now? And that's cool, man.
Yeah,
I
get
a lot of slugs in it, mate. So I don't think that. So I even see slugs with blue canopy chase, which isn't really a thing. You normally see them on the concrete, like or asphalt. Like you normally see them on
after it's been raining. Yeah. But one of the things hedgehogs do is they eat slugs and snails. So if you're a gardener in England or in Britain, you want a hedgehog because they're going to keep your slugs and snails down for sure.
It's actually true. When Poles first came to the UK, they started killing swans.
Yeah, that was. I remember that actually. That was a bit of a problem.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there was even a few down near me. They weren't killing swans, but they were fishing in a local pond, and it's like it's no fishing, and they just didn't seem to understand. I think some of them just didn't care, and they go down there fishing all the time.
I used to be big into fishing when I was a teenager, and in England there's a season when you can fish and a season when you can't because the fish are breeding and all that sort of thing. And foreigners, they just don't get this shit. They don't get it.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, again, I mean, you kind of saw this, like Americans always used to make this point, like American leftists, that the Irish, when they moved over, they integrated. Well, a lot of the bad Irish just went back home. That's why the Irish appeared to integrate. I think we had a similar thing here with the Poles, and we sort of didn't notice it. We had a lot of Poles come over, and the worst elements went home after a while.
Yep. I think Tim of Arminius is making a good point here about Australia. Absolutely true. I mean, like Murray cod in Australia are basically totally protected. If you catch one of those things, you've got to put it back because they're quite rare. I mean, Murray cod, for anyone who doesn't understand, they're a freshwater fish that gets huge. They can be like, I think at their biggest, they can be 7 or 8 foot long, but they're very rare now. And so if you catch one, you've got to put it back. You're not allowed to keep it. But I can absolutely believe that Vietnamese, Chinese, and all these other people will not understand that.
Yeah, I think Red Hawk said something along those lines. Like you said, I don't know if you said a bit about America or Canada, where because he pondered, what's going to happen when the immigrants start to number so much in a lot of areas, where what happens to the local wildlife? Because I mean, I don't know. I don't want to black pill too much on the question of animal welfare.
But no, I think you're right, Mitch. I mean, like Red Hawk is a guy who likes his deer hunting and this kind of stuff. But like most of those guys, he's really a conservationist. Like, he wants to be able to knock off the odd deer in the season, but he doesn't want those animals to die out. Not at all.
Yeah, so he's kind of got the attitude of hunter-gatherer, like Western hunter-gatherer kind of mindset, which is like, you hunt. Like, I don't know why he hunts. I mean, I'm assuming he's just hunting for food, or like hunts because it's a good pastime. I mean, it's like Morgoth for talking about fishing. I I need to start going fishing one of these days because I keep talking about it for years. I need to start doing it at some point. I see kids who are like 10 near me who are going fishing, and I'm thinking, yeah, so that's a bit of a white pill. The fact that there are children
I used to
near me who
love
actually do
fishing
care about
when I
that.
was a young man. I loved fishing. I did. Used to go fishing, I don't know, 3 days out of 7, basically. When I was like a teenager, Mitch. But most of the stuff I caught, I just used to put straight back because it wasn't edible anyway. It was just, you and the competition between the fish, basically. But yeah, Red Hawk's a good guy. I like him. I've never been into shooting deer and antelope and stuff like that. I used to do it. I used to have to do it because my black African soldiers in the SADF expected me to kill them an antelope every couple of weeks. Was never the favorite thing I did, to be honest. And if it hadn't have been for my soldiers, I wouldn't have done it, to be honest.
I've been deer stalking. I liked it.
Yeah, no,
I mean,
look, I get it. I get it, Alan. But you know what? We used to stalk men, so, and they had AK-47. So once you've done that, stalking some poor bloody antelope is not quite as interesting, if you know what I mean.
I mean, I don't see why you'd hunt animals with a gun. You normally, I mean, I can understand. I mean, normally you think of doing it with a bow and arrow, because when you shoot an animal with a bullet, you're gonna have to. First thing you have to do once you've got the carcass back home is you have to fish for bullet first, and even you have to make sure it hasn't broken up into like smaller components. Like you've got to watch for shrapnel.
No,
breaking
mate,
off
you
or
don't
whatever.
do that. You don't do that, Mitch. You skin it. Right? Normally, like you shoot a deer or an antelope, you shoot it in the heart or in the head, but you don't need to look for the bullet. You really don't, mate. You take it home, you hang it up, and you skin it. But I never liked killing some poor bloody herbivore, that was just minding its own business. I did it because my soldiers would have mutinied if I didn't, quite frankly, because they were black African soldiers who required venison every so often. So, yeah. And I was supposed to do it because I was in charge of the company. But I can't say I really liked it, to be honest. I get why people do like it, but no, raw biscuits. I'm not a veggie, not at all. No, not at all. But
I was a veggie.
no, I'm not a veggie. I eat steak. I had a steak yesterday. I'm going to have pork chops today. So no, not exactly. But I just didn't like shooting defenseless animals. I wasn't my thing. But I did it because you just make sure you don't shoot like a mother in the season when they're dropping calves. You try not to do that.
Well, I mean, hunting isn't too bad as long as you're doing it in a sustainable way. Like you're not just killing off droves.
No, I don't think it's bad. I'm not trying to say it's bad. I'm just trying to say I didn't like it. Just me.
Yeah, but it's one of those things where you're doing it to feed soldiers. Like you're doing it, like you're not doing it out of sadism. So there's no reason for you to feel bad about it. In my opinion.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right, mate. I don't have a great guilt thing over it. If I didn't have to shoot antelope, I wouldn't have shot antelope because you know what? They're just herbivores eating grass and leaves, and I really didn't particularly want to kill them.
Okay, but like,
On the
I
other
mean,
hand, I never had a
enjoy
problem
chicken.
about killing communists. Didn't ever have a problem.
Base.
I
Yeah,
never had a problem about killing communists. You know, if you were a commie, I'd blow you away, no problem.
I mean, we
But
go to
they
the extent
had
of
a-
saying they're not people, but you're saying they're less than animals, which is actually
absolutely
accurate
right,
and
mate.
true.
Absolutely right. And also, they had AK-47s. They could fire back. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like if you're hunting, let's say an antelope, for example. I mean, it's one of those things where you know you're not hunting for fun. You're not hunting for sadistic pleasure. You're hunting because it's provide food, and you're not causing extinction. You're not causing any massive ecological disaster by killing one off and eating it one every few weeks. Because I mean, hunter gatherer. I mean, I don't think Western hunter gatherers, like our ancestors who make up 13% of our genome, if I remember correctly, I don't think they would have had that similar sense of sentiment about hunting for food. I mean, I want it to be more dog eat dog world for them than it is for us compared to like nowadays. But still, it's just one of those things where it's either kill or be killed. I suppose. I mean, well, not really with an antelope, but you still was it. I mean,
No
killing
animal
antelope is
was
basically
ever going to kill me, Mitch. I gotta say.
Yep. Yeah, but it. Was, I know. You know one thing I saw that was ridiculous. So I saw this TikTok. Okay, I said cows were the most. He said that cows are the most dangerous animals in Britain, and I'm just sat there thinking, how? Like I don't know how. Like, I've seen like some of these urbanites, kind of like left wingers, basically, and they're all saying that cows are dangerous. And I'm just sat
They
there
can
thinking,
be.
why can they
Not
be?
very often, Mitch. Not as I'm adamant. Not very often.
They can trample you.
Well, they can.
They
but-
get quite exuberant. Not in like
Yeah.
a bad way, but there's a field I walk through quite often. And most of the time there aren't cows in there, but sometimes there are. And I've walked up to it because you can't see what's in the field until you get right up to the stile.
Mm.
And I've walked up to it and then seen that they're in there and they've got calves with them.
Mhm.
And if you sit there long enough and they spot you, they all come trundling over.
Yeah.
And I'll stroke them through the bars on the gate, and they've got fair sized horns on them, and they're only playing around. But you know, if you don't whip your hand out quick enough, sometimes they could easily crush your arm.
Yeah.
Or
They're
you know,
animals.
yeah,
They're animals. Yeah, absolutely. Animals are not machines. When my son was like, I don't know, 3 or 4, I used to stick him on my shoulders, and hold his legs, and walk him through these lovely beech woods. And his favorite place to go, he used to say to me, "Dad, are we going to see the cowses?" That's how he said it. "Are we going to see the cowses, Dad?" And I'd say, "Yeah." And like we'd go, and there'd be this field on the corner where there's a big gate, and the cows would all come over. And I taught my son how to get some grass or whatever and put it in his hand and hold it flat so the cow couldn't bite it, you know,
Yeah.
when he was 3 or 4. And that was my son's favorite place to go. And then we'd go along a little bit further, and there was a great big badger set. And yeah, it was kind of cool, you know.
Yeah, they're lovely animals, but they can be very skittish.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And they when they're in if they're wary of you, but they've also got numbers, they can be a bit bolshy.
Yep, but you know,
And
anyone who's used to them understands how to do this shit. Like I used to walk around with fucking Nguni cows, which are like African cows, and these things were semi-wild. And like, if you were not an idiot, they weren't gonna hurt you. You know.
Yeah.
They just wouldn't, because you were more intelligent than they were. You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, all of that is absolutely true. Victor Caleros was asking me if my soldiers were Zulu, Xhosa, some other tribe. They were actually Shoshangan, which is an offshoot of the Zulus. That's who most of my soldiers were. I did have a couple of Zulu soldiers, but most of my soldiers were Shoshangan, which is an offshoot of the Zulus who were in Mozambique, pretty much.
And what was this as part of what force?
That was we were a supposedly elite regiment, right? Supposedly.
Oh.
And our enemy called us the terrible ones.
It's nice when you get a name, though.
It was not because we were bad, it was because we used to kill a lot of the enemy.
And what was the tribe that you were with?
The guys I knew were Zulus because I was in Northern Natal.
Yeah.
But the Shoshangan are an offshoot of the Zulus who moved to Mozambique, which used to be Portuguese East Africa. And most of our soldiers were Shoshangan, and they hated the commies because they'd fought them under the Portuguese. Some of them had fought them like with the Rhodesians, and then eventually they ended up in my mob fighting them with the South Africans, and really, really hated the communists. But yeah, they were pretty good guys. On the whole, they were pretty good guys. I had the honor to be in 32 Battalion, which is some people will say we were an elite regiment. I'm not sure we were really, but we killed a lot of communists, so I'll say that. But, whatever. Yeah, someone says a goat ate his coat once. Were you asleep or drunk or what? You'd have to be one of those things.
Yeah, I got like some people in the chat saying these animals are dangerous. I'm thinking, well, I mean, sheep are just retards from personal experience. I mean,
oh God, I worked on a sheep farm once for about a month, mate. Sheep are the stupidest animals you ever find. But
yeah, it's like one time I was on my way to university, and because along the way there was like a sheep farm right next to the main road, so the sheep broke through the main enclosure and kept running onto the road every 5 seconds, and the main farmer was off somewhere. He had to go to like a market or something. So in his place was his like 16-year-old daughter, and I had to help her herd all the sheep back in because she couldn't do it all by herself. And
I hope you had a dog, mate. I hope you had a dog. You really need a dog to herd sheep.
I didn't see a dog, so I think it was just her by herself. Unless the dog was absent for a reason, I don't think I had a dog, unfortunately. So it was literally me and the girl having to herd me.
You definitely need a dog to herd sheep. Human civilization started with dogs and horses, basically. You don't have dogs, you don't have horses, there ain't no human civilization, basically.
Yeah, I can actually believe it in Cornwall, sheep's jumping off the cliffs. I mean, there's a Welsh valley I went on holiday in, and the sheep were just at like the top, at a really high height.
Yeah,
just
can believe it.
Dangling about off the edge, just waiting to jump, like they're full like lemmings. And you just thinking,
but Mitch, you do know in Wales, men are men and the sheep are worried, don't you?
Yeah, I think my old man used to say, my old man used to say if there was ever an action movie set in Wales, it would start with Arnold Sheepshagger.
Yep. Australians say the same thing about New Zealanders. In New Zealand, men are men and the sheep are worried. But yeah, look, it's a joke. Of course, it's a joke, but it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I think
All right,
I wonder
guys.
what people say about the Falklands as well, because a lot of the Falklands have more sheep than people.
Oh yeah, way more.
Yeah.
Way more. Yeah, there's way more sheep in the Falklands than people. But that's all right. I look, like I said, that was a joke, guys. I'm not saying that seriously. Don't think it's true of Welshmen. Don't think it's true of New Zealanders. Definitely don't think it's true of Falkland Islands.
To be fair, I don't think the joke would be lost on them unless they're American
Yeah,
and not.
it's
fully
just a joke. It's just a joke. It's just a joke, boys.
Yeah, unless they're Americans who don't understand fully our banter, then.
Like many Americans don't understand our banter, but yeah, but absolutely, it's just a joke.
Well, I mean,
Tomb of Arminius is saying Falklands as in an Argentinian island. Well, fuck you, mate. All right, absolutely, fuck you. The Falklands have always been British. They'll never fucking change. They'll always be British. So you can get fucked, Tomb of Arminius, all right? They've been British since the 1830s, never been anything else. 99% of the people there living there vote to stay British. They'll never be Argentinian, never, ever. Just like Gibraltar.
Voting's gay.
All right.
I mean, it is. You can't argue with it. I mean, they might end up. I mean, we don't know to what extent our government's going to continue declining. They might not be British forever.
As far as I'm concerned, the first nationalist British government that takes over will send a task force down there and take them back.
Well, I mean, you've got the Chagos Islands, which we nearly gave over to the bleeding Mauritians because of what's his name? Tom Cleverley or whatever his name is. He was Home Secretary under the previous government.
No such place as the Malvinas, Bolero. It doesn't exist.
He's winding you up.
I know he is, but it doesn't exist. There's just a load of Argentinian graves.
Anyway, I'm going to have to get off because it is very late.
Yeah, no, we've been going a long time. I want to finish this anyway, but yeah. Same as Gibraltar, JMH. Exactly.
Right.
British forever.
Talk to you later.
Thanks for coming on, Adamant. You're always most welcome. Anything you wanted to plug, mate?
No, nothing from me.
All right, mate.
Have a good night, everyone.
Go on, mate. There's no such thing as the Malvinas. There's no such thing as Spanish Gibraltar. You guys are all deluded. We'll never.
I recommend Spanish line. We should change that from being Las Malvinas to Los Falklandos a bit at this point.
Yeah. Never gonna happen. Like the chances of Argentina is never gonna run the Falkland Islands, and Spain is never gonna run Gibraltar, and they should just give up. All right, they should just give up.
Yeah, you know Javier Milei over in Argentina.
Or they get more guys killed.
Yeah, you know Javier Milei over in Argentina.
Yeah, I know of him. Yeah, he's a.
He. I mean, he doesn't believe that Falklands should be Argentine. Like he just doesn't. Because I mean, his personal hero is Maggie Thatcher, and he's not really in the mood of taking them back. Well, I say taking them back, at least in the eyes of the Argentines, anyway.
I'd like to see him try with his current Argentinian military. They wouldn't have a chance. But yeah, all right. but very sensible, in my opinion. Yeah, Britain spilt too much blood over the Falkland Islands to ever give it back.
I mean, there was a Chagos Island where we nearly gave them over to Mauritius, so I won't be surprised if our government, literally in just sheer decline, just ends up giving them over.
But we didn't. Like the British Indian Ocean Territory is still the British Indian Ocean Territory. So,
Yeah, but that's the point, though, isn't it? Like, our governments don't really have an appetite to even keep those territories. So
I don't know. Our warships go there every year, mate.
Okay, and as I said, like, you got former Home Secretary Cleverly who tried to give them over to Mauritius. It was only because of the Tory backbenchers protesting against it that it didn't happen, as well as also the wishes of the islanders
Yeah, I
themselves.
totally agree. I totally agree, mate. I'm not saying I think anything good about the British government. I don't. Aubrey just joined the chat. Aubrey, if you join the chat and you go right back to the beginning, you even get mentioned a few times, right? There you go. But yeah, no, I'm not saying a single good thing about the British government. But the Falkland Islands, there's a lot of British blood in the Falkland Islands, and any British government that tried to give that to Argentina would be destroyed at the next election. That's my honest opinion. I don't know what you think, Mitch, but that's my opinion.
Well, I mean, as you would say, well, we got Uniparty, so what do you think?
I don't know. You see, what I see, we haven't talked about this, and it's too late in the stream to talk about it now. But maybe next week we'll talk about it. I think that Farage is going to replace the so-called Conservative.
I don't think that'll happen personally, because I think Azir Youssef situation has fumbled it now for him.
All right. Well, we'll talk about that next week, Mitch. But I think he is going to replace the so-called Conservatives, and at the next election, you're going to get over 100 Reform MPs.
You've been too hopeful. Like, I'm going.
No. Look, mate. Well, you and I may disagree on this, but I really seriously think that Farage could become the slightly more intelligent UK Trump.
No, I don't. I think it's humbled. And also, going off my personal experience with Reform, they've got no local game. They've got no local organisation whatsoever. So, from these local elections,
we're talking about him. We are talking about in 3 or 4 years' time. But maybe. Look, you might be right, Mitch. I don't know. We'll talk about it next week.
I'll tell you
Mitch,
this.
Anything?
I'll tell you this with a sense of confidence. They will not do well in the local elections because Farage is he's not the kind of guy to build a political movement around.
Okay. Well, like I said, we'll talk about it next week. Mitch, anything you would like to plug, mate?
Not for me, no.
Not your Twitter or anything like that?
Well, you can do if you want, but I mean,
I'm not doing it, but you can.
Well, I mean, I think you've linked it enough times that anyone who listens to this stream already knows on my Twitter. Even though I'm ridiculously shadow banned, and
Yep. I agree. And you're Anglo Gropnik, aren't you, on Twitter?
Yeah, Anglo Gropnik. But
Anglo Gropnik. Yep, there you go.
Yeah, the thing is, I don't come up on the search bar. I'm that shadow banned. I don't even come up.
Go and follow Anglo Gropnik on Twitter. Most of the time, Mitch is very sensible. But anyway, thank you, Mitch, for joining us this evening. You're always welcome, mate. So yeah, go all, guys. Don't let the bastards grind you down. We'll see you next week.